Outside a grand government building, a voice calls out for Sei Fault. Inside, Sei is confronted with an unbelievable demand from her master. Prepare an additional 1,000 potions by tomorrow. Stunned, she can only ask if it's some kind of joke. She immediately protests, but the speaker, her master, dismisses the complaint. The woman insists that such a task should be easy for Sei, adding that she has other matters to attend to. The woman continues, reminding Sei that making potions for the royal palace is the duty of a court alchemist. She flatters her, calling her a genius who can breeze through the task, and pointing out that she is the pupil of the legendary alchemist and the youngest person to ever hold the position at just 15 years old. Her words do little to soothe Sei, who internally fumes that she only took this job to escape her master's hellish training. The demand to get it all done by tomorrow is, to her, far too much. This master is none other than the living legend, Nicholas Flamel, an alchemist credited with countless notable achievements. She developed a full recovery potion, established the fundamental theory of artificial life forms, and lowered the price of potions by creating mass production technology. And yet, for Sei, she is just her overbearing master. Back in the present, Sei frantically searches a room, only to discover her master has vanished, leaving only a flippant letter telling Sei to do her work for her. The realization sends Sei into a rage. She screams, calling her master a brute and a demon for forcefully hammering all her techniques and knowledge into her. The rage triggers a memory of her desperate decision to escape. Having been worked to death since she was only 5, she declared she would leave and become the court alchemist. To take the qualification test required over 10 years of practical experience under a master, a condition her grueling upbringing fulfilled, making her the youngest to ever qualify. Her frustration returns to the present, now directed at the head chief. He keeps pushing more work on her simply because the potions she makes are of such high quality. She feels utterly overworked and unappreciated. She stands alone by a window, the weight of the task pressing down on her. The idea of making 1,000 more potions all by herself is ludicrous, and she screams into the empty room, demanding that someone think about her workload. She clenches her fists, her frustration boiling over. While she knows she can handle the work, she feels utterly beleaguered. People around her claim they can't match her quality, yet they continuously push their own tasks onto her. She wonders if they're truly that incapable, or if they're simply harassing her, treating her as an eyesore. She hates this workplace. Her expression hardens as a single, weary question forms in her mind. Why does she even bother keeping this job? The thought sends her spiraling into a memory. She recalls wondering if she should just quit, even idly plotting to poison the damn chief someday. It was a thought from long ago. The memory sharpens, focusing on her as a small child. A village chief stands before her, coldly stating that since her parents were killed by monsters, the village has no means to care for her. He tells her not to be thrown out, but the implication is clear. Just as she is dismissed, a woman's hand reaches out. The woman, her future master, tells the chief that he doesn't need the girl and that she will take her. She asks for the child's name and age. The small girl looks up, relieved, and introduces herself. Sei Fault. Returning to the present, Sei lets out a long sigh. She knows she can't quit. She only became a court alchemist because her master put in a recommendation for her, and quitting would bring shame upon the woman who saved her. Frustrated, she mutters sarcastically, wishing for meteors or a huge horde of monsters to just come and crush the capital. As if in answer to her dark musing, panicked shouts suddenly erupt from the streets below. A monster invasion. A large horde is advancing on the capital. Sei stands frozen on her balcony, her flippant thought of that ain't happening, instantly rendered moot by the unfolding chaos. Her shock gives way to dawning horror as she recalls a lesson from her master. When food becomes scarce, monsters will raid human settlements in large hordes. This is a true monster invasion. The knowledge clashes with reality. There shouldn't be any forests where monsters dwell anywhere near the capital. A cold sweat breaks out on her brow. The raw, primal fear of death grips her. She realizes with stark clarity that there is very little time to do anything. But that fear quickly hardens into grim resolve. She has to go home. Even if she tries to handle the situation now, she has no potions for combat. Her only course of action is to return to her workshop and start making them. With a determined glare, she turns and runs. She stands in her workshop, surveying her supplies. A grim realization dawns on her. Most of her ingredients have gone bad. Without them, she knows she cannot make any potions to use in combat. Faced with this dilemma, she frantically wonders what to do. She considers that the evacuation shelter in the royal palace is guarded by knights and adventurers and should be safe, but a deep anxiety remains. Clenching her fist, she resolves to use what little she has to protect herself. With her decision made, she curses her master, realizing she barely has time to get home as chaos erupts in the streets. Citizens scream in terror, shouting that monsters are coming and urging everyone to run for their lives. In the midst of the panic, she quickly uncorks a small vial and drinks its contents. A wave of nausea hits her as she collapses to the ground, unconscious. Sometime later, she stirs on the floor of her workshop, mumbling in her sleep as daylight streams through the window. Her eyes snap open with a gasp. She pushes herself up, startled, wondering what time it is and if she has overslept. As she gets her bearings, her gaze falls upon the doorway, which is now a splintered wreck. She worries that if she's late, her chief will never stop scolding her, but then stops, confused by the sight before her. She looks outside and is met with an impossible view. Her home is no longer in the city, but is now a dilapidated ruin, standing alone in the middle of a dense forest. She cries out in disbelief. What in the world? Stumbling back, she clutches her head, trying to get her thoughts straight. She recalls the monster invasion and that she made 2 potions. The question of how her house turned into ruins overnight, and how this all happened, overwhelms her. A memory surfaces, providing a partial answer. First, she had crafted a monster ward potion. Lacking sufficient ingredients for a stronger concoction, she had then splashed it around her house to barricade herself inside. She struggles to piece together what happened, recalling that she made and drank a pseudo-side potion. It was a magical drug designed to induce a state of hibernation, a way to wait out the monster invasion she was sure would be over after some time. Now, having just awoken, she decides her first step is to assess the situation by heading to the royal palace. However, the path to the palace reveals a devastating sight. She stands amidst the rubble of what was once a grand city, lamenting how the once prosperous capital has been reduced to ruins. The sheer scale of the destruction leaves her reeling. She quietly wonders what happened to everyone, how many years could have possibly passed, and voices the dreadful fear that she might be the only survivor. She forcefully shakes her head, pushing aside such complicated and grim thoughts. Instead, she chooses to believe a more optimistic version of events. The palace knights must have defeated the monsters, and the citizens simply left the ruined city to start new lives elsewhere. For her own sanity, she decides to leave it at that. With a new resolve, she decides her immediate plan is to travel to a different city to gather information. But before setting off, she knows she must prepare. From the palm of her hand, she summons her portable alchemy workshop. The small cube activates, deploying the magical workshop in a swirl of light and mechanical components that assemble themselves before her. Now, at her workbench, she plans her production. First, she will brew as many healing potions as possible with the ingredients she has on hand, then use whatever is left to create monster war potions. In short order, the potions are finished and stocked. She notes that while she can store them inside the workshop, she must be careful, as the accelerated flow of time within it will cause them to deteriorate faster. For immediate use, she transfers them into a perfume bottle to use as a spray. With her preparations complete, she steps away from the dilapidated house that was once her home, ready to begin her journey. As she begins to walk, she reflects that every place she knows is now in ruins, leaving her unsure of what to do next. Her thoughts are cut short by a sudden rustling from a nearby bush, and she immediately drops into a crouch, startled by the sound. The sound that had startled her was the clash of steel. Not far from her position, a young swordsman desperately fended off a beastly attacker, his blade a blur of motion. He was not alone. Another adventurer, his face obscured by a hood, struggled against 2 more of the creatures, barely holding his ground. From her hiding spot, Sei watched the chaos unfold. She realized with a start that a party of adventurers was being attacked by monstrous, wolf-like beings. She recognized them instantly, kobolds. A pack of the vicious, dog-headed humanoids swarmed the adventurers. The sheer number of them was overwhelming. Damn kobolds, one of the fallen adventurers cursed. The hooded fighter, seeing his comrades on the ground, felt a wave of hopelessness. He lamented that there were too many of them, concluding they were utterly screwed. Despite the grim situation, the lead swordsman held his blade ready with a confident smirk. Well, he began, as a nearby horse whinnied nervously. His confidence seemed misplaced. The adventurers were completely surrounded by the kobold horde, with 2 of their party already down. The hooded man's earlier thought echoed the reality of their situation. They were definitely doomed. Seeing their plight, an idea formed in Sei's mind. If she helped them, perhaps they would let her ride in their carriage to the next town. A sly smile spread across her face as she uncorked a potion. It was time she decided to show off her alchemy skill. Observing a group of adventurers led by a swordsman, Sei decides to intervene, believing that if she helps them, they will guide her to a town. She reveals her ace, a monster ward potion. With a determined expression, she hurls the vial, which shatters on the ground and erupts in a thick cloud of smoke. The potion's effect on the nearby wolf-like creatures is immediate. They yelp and turn to flee from the spreading vapor. However, the potion has an entirely unforeseen consequence. The swordsman looks back in stunned silence as his companions, once male adventurers, are transformed into a group of women who promptly flee the scene in confusion. As he stands frozen, Sei approaches and asks if he is all right. Startled, he asks who she is, explaining that he is merely a traveler. She notices his injuries and, putting on a friendly smile, offers him a healing potion. The traveler stares, wide-eyed and sweating, clearly shocked by her sudden appearance and generous offer. He shouts his gratitude, amazed that she would give him such a valuable item. Internally, Sei bristles at being called a young miss, reminding herself that she is, in fact, 20 years old. True to her initial hope, The traveler repays her kindness by guiding her to the nearby town of Sanzhou, a settlement of quaint, timber-framed buildings. Upon arriving, Sei remarks that the townscape looks just like the capital. The traveler confirms she knows of it, explaining that this town was modeled after the old capital, not the current one. From a high vantage point, she connects this information to a large ruin she saw near where they met. The traveler asks if she is referring to the old capital. He confirms her suspicion, gesturing toward the crumbling structures in the distance. Those ruins are the old capital, a city that perished 500 years ago. He rushes to her side, startled by her sudden distress, and asks if she is all right. But her shock is not from fear. The words 500 years echo in her mind, and a slow, dawning realization spreads across her face. Her shock gives way to a wide, triumphant grin. The passage of 5 centuries means only one thing to her. She is finally free. Her thoughts race with newfound optimism. In this future, nobody knows her. The idea of exploring this new world seems far from terrible. In fact, since she had been considering quitting her job anyway, this turn of events is perfect. With no family to mourn, she concludes there is no reason at all to be sad. A flicker of memory interrupts her cheerful thoughts. There is, she recalls, still one person who knows of her. His voice pulls her back to the present. He suggests they head to the guild to be safe and sort things out. Composing herself, Sei dismisses her earlier reaction as nothing and agrees that it's a good idea. She beams with a wide, genuine-looking smile, expressing her gratitude for his offer to escort her. He thanks her in return as they arrive at a large, official-looking building, the local guild hall. Once they are situated, he asks what she plans to do next. Without hesitation, Sei announces that she's going to buy a slave. The swordsman is taken aback, but she confirms her intention, adding that she knows there is a slave trader nearby. Her internal monologue reveals her true motive. She knows nothing about this world, 500 years in her future. Lacking even basic knowledge of the current era's common sense would make her dangerously conspicuous. For that reason, she has concluded that she needs a slave. Her thoughts turn to her alchemical tools. She possesses potions that can make people forget their most recent memories, but such a thing cannot be used repeatedly. She recalls already using a forgetful potion several times on the swordsman, the leader, and realizes that if someone saw her doing that, she would immediately be viewed with suspicion. This is the true reason she needs a slave, a permanent companion she won't have to magically manipulate. She recalls the words of her master. Information is a weapon. Lacking knowledge puts one at a disadvantage, while possessing it grants an upper hand. To avoid being used by others, one must educate oneself. This line of thinking leads her to a grim conclusion. Slaves are the most convenient way to extract information about this world, as their contracts prevent them from lying to or defying their master. This makes them a trustworthy source, and it is for this reason she must carefully gather information from one. Despite this cold logic, her expression hardens. She admits to herself that, honestly, she does not want to buy a slave. The thought is repulsive to her, as she refuses to view slaves as mere usable objects. A bitter memory surfaces of her own past, recalling how she was treated like a slave by that old hag, Nicholas Flamel. Her companion, the swordsman, interrupts her thoughts, expressing his confusion. He asks why she want to buy a slave, pointing out that the slaves sold in the city are of low value due to having some sort of defect. He asks if she's still fine with this. She turns away, confirming his statement with a simple, yeah. She then thanks him again for his help, but asks him to please stop treating her like a child, attempting to end the conversation. With her resolve firm, she arrives at the slave trader's establishment. She reassures herself that it's all right, as she has secured the necessary funds by selling her potions to the swordsman's leader. Inside, the slave trader greets them, asking what kind of goods she is looking for. Sei reflects on the transaction that brought her here. The world seems to be dominated by the Church of Heavenly Way, which apparently controls the sale of potions. This makes potions hard to find, which is why her potions were bought for a price that even she, who doesn't know the current currency value, would consider a huge sum of money. In response to the trader's question, she cheerfully lays out her plan. She wants a young and healthy slave for a cheap price. She clarifies that she prefers them young and doesn't mind if they have injuries or illnesses, as she can simply heal them with her potions. The slave trader asks her to wait a moment, likely taken aback by the unusual request. As he steps away, Sei internally expresses her gratitude for having learned alchemy, the very skill that makes her audacious plan possible. She stood in the sparse room, looking over the 3 girls she had just acquired. Having intended to buy only 1 slave, she wondered aloud how she had ended up with 3. The slave trader's grim assessment of their conditions came to mind. Daphne, a beastkin of the Robbie race, had lost her right ear and was so psychologically scarred she apologized nonstop. Xenphis, a human, was blind and covered in burn marks. The last, a lizard man named Toka, was in the most dire state. Her scales had been forcibly stripped away, and she was missing her right arm, left leg, and right eye. As the girls collectively begged for forgiveness, Sei's frustration was not with them. Her anger was directed at the smirking slave trader, who had refused to sell any unless she bought all 3. She silently cursed the man. Seeing Toka's fear, she softened her expression, assuring them not to worry and that all three would be staying together. Zenfis, her voice filled with urgency, explained that Daphne could die if left alone, and that Toka would be willing to kill her own master just to keep them from being separated. Say, surprised by Zenfis's eloquence, then turned her attention to another matter. She asked if Toka was unable to speak, or if she simply did not want to. Zenfis confirmed it was the former. She elaborated that Toka's inability to speak was due to a punishment from their previous master. Her throat had been crushed, a condition Sei recognized as the worst possible for the lizard man. This revelation prompted another question. Sei observed that despite her youth, Zenfis spoke very fluently. Zenfis clarified that she was speaking on behalf of the other two. As Zenfis spoke for them, Daphne trembled, muttering please not to be hit. Seeing their collective fear, Sei smiled brightly and introduced herself. My name is Sei. Just call me Sei, she announced, declaring that from that day on, they would all be in each other's care. With introductions made, she got straight to the point. The girls looked on, confused, as Sei declared that the first order of business was to heal them, acknowledging to herself that it would be a rocky road ahead. Without further delay, she initiated her craft. Alchemy workshop. Deploy, she commanded. A complex array of magical gears and platforms materialized in the air, terrifying the girls. Zenfis cried out that something was floating. Daphne begged her to stop shaking, and Toka, unable to see, simply expressed her fear. She presents 3 ornate bottles, each filled with a shimmering liquid, and instructs the girls to drink. Her command is met with disbelief. Zenfis cries out in shock, while Toka murmurs that she doesn't think their bodies can be healed anymore. Daphne, however, cautiously wonders if the vials contain healing potions. As Sei listens, Toka elaborates on their despair, stating that healing potions typically only treat bleeding wounds. She laments that Sei must have spent a great deal of money on something so expensive for them. She confidently corrects them, insisting that these potions will indeed heal them. To their astonishment, she adds that she didn't buy them, but rather made them right there on the spot, leaving the girls speechless. She explains that she was able to do so by using her alchemy workshop. She details its function. Time flows differently within the magical box, drastically reducing the duration of the alchemical process, while all the necessary tools are reproduced inside by magic. This unique process, she declares, allows for the swift production of high-quality potions. Holding one of the finished vials aloft, she proudly proclaims this is Flamel-style alchemy, a fusion of spatial magic and traditional alchemy. Her complex explanation leaves the 3 girls utterly bewildered. Zenfis whimpers that she doesn't understand, and Toka admits she is unfamiliar with this type of alchemy. Sei calmly adds that its guaranteed high quality makes the potions valuable to adventurers, though this does little to clear their confusion. She continues, clarifying that the workshop is not omnipotent. The quality of the final product still depends on the alchemist's skill and the ingredients used, as the cube only transmutes what is put inside it. She concedes that even creating the workshop itself was quite a handful. Bringing the technical discussion to a close, she turns back to the girls, holding the potions out to Toka and Zenfis. She urges them to drink, assuring them that these are far more potent than any ordinary potion. The forceful command triggers a fearful reaction in Zenfis, who flinches and begs not to be hit. Despite her terror, she resolves to drink it. Witnessing this, Sei's approach softens as she gently offers a potion directly to Daphne. She flinched as Sei offered the potion, her body trembling with fear. Seeing her terror, Sei leaned closer, her voice gentle as she promised not to harm her. She offered a bright, earnest smile, pleading with the girl to believe her. Her words hung in the air, but Daphne remained silent, her gaze fixed downward as she wrestled with her fear. Nearby, Toka, still cloaked in a blanket, turned to Zenfis. She observed the scene and quietly suggested that perhaps they could trust their benefactor. With shared trepidation, Daphne, Zenfis, and Toka all raised the vials to their lips and began to sip the glowing liquid. The moment the potions were consumed, a blinding flash of magical energy erupted from the 3 girls, illuminating the entire room. As the lights subsided, Toka cried out in astonishment. She touched her face, her limbs, her voice filled with disbelief as she realized her eye, her arm, and her leg were fully restored. She then gasped, realizing her voice, once damaged, was now clear and strong. This prompted Daphne to reach up, her hand tentatively touching one of her long rabbit ears. Zenfis, her eyes wide with wonder, joyfully declared that she could see again, while Daphne cheered that her ear was back. Observing them, Sei noted that the healing appeared to be complete. They stood together, completely transformed. Daphne's rabbitkin features were restored. Zenfis was the picture of health, and Toka had evolved into a striking dragonkin. Sei stared, her mind reeling in shock, questioning what these girls had become. She found herself momentarily overwhelmed. They were already cute to begin with, but after being healed, she couldn't help but think they were now awfully cute. Her thoughts were interrupted as Zenfis observed Toka with a gasp, remarking on how much her appearance had changed and that she no longer had any scales. Toka looked down at herself, seemingly just noticing the wondrous transformation. Zenfis's eyes widened with understanding as she deduced that Toka must have evolved from a lizard man into a fire dragonkin. Flexing her new wings, Toka roared in agreement, proclaiming that she was bursting with energy and felt even more powerful than before. Turning her attention to their benefactor, Zenfis politely addressed her as Seiki Falsama, then requested permission to simply call her Seisama, explaining that using the full name was unnecessary. Sei smiled, agreeing and complimenting Zenfis on how quickly she was adapting. Her gaze then fell upon the girl's newly pointed ears. Zenfis confirmed she was an elf, explaining that this accounted for her mature manner of speech. She revealed that her ears had been cut off, and now, thanks to Sei, she had undergone her own existential evolution. As Zenfis wept with gratitude, Sei reflected on the girl's sharp wits. She had grasped the nature of Toka's evolution in a single glance, but Sei sensed there was something else special in her eyes as well. She silently affirmed her own observation. The moment was broken by Daphne's amazed cry, her long rabbit ears twitching with excitement as she celebrated that her own body was back to normal. The three girls then turned to Sei in unison, overwhelming her with their gratitude. Toka called her my lord, Lady Saint, while Zenfis expressed her thanks. Daphne, in awe, wondered aloud if Sei could be a saint from the Church of Heavenly Way. Zenfis rushed forward, embracing Sei and thanking her as Big Sis Saint. Flustered by the title and the affection, Sei stammered that she wasn't a saint, adding that she didn't even know what a saint was. Her denial was met with a collective cry of disbelief. The three girls stared at her, utterly shocked, insisting that there was no way her words could be true. She could be none other than a saint. Flustered, Sei insists that she is not a saint, demanding to know what this whole affair is about. She trails off, thinking she is simply something else. For a moment, she gazes out the window at the moonlit sky, reflecting that she is already free, but she quickly dismisses the thought. She turns back with a determined smile, declaring her true ambition, to be an alchemist who freely goes on a carefree journey. However, Daphne, her rabbit ears twitching, apologetically informs Sei that, for her, such a simple life is just not possible. The three girls stand together as Toka elaborates on their reasoning. She questions where in the world one could possibly find a mere alchemist whose potions can regrow missing limbs and even cause a species to evolve. The implication is clear. Sei's abilities far exceed those of any normal practitioner. As the debate continues, Daphne looks on with teary eyes, feeling overlooked. She meekly raises a hand, as if to remind the others of her presence in the room. Seemingly brushing aside their concerns, Sei changes the subject, beginning with a decisive, well, in any case. The group remains gathered in the room, the previous argument left hanging. From the window, Sei's voice rings out across the town. She joyfully proclaims that she has acquired adorable companions for her journey and declares that they will all go buy cute clothes the next day. Her three new companions can only react with a collective, stunned cry of surprise. Sei beams with delight, exclaiming how lovely the three girls look in their new outfits. Daphne, overjoyed, affectionately calls her One-Ichan. Zenfis offers her sincere thanks for the new clothes, while Toka, ever practical, observes that the design seems a little old-fashioned. Her heart full, she pulls Daphne into a tight, affectionate hug, cooing about how fluffy the rabbitkin is. As Toka quietly notes how close Sei has become to her new companions, Zenfis watches them with a silent, unreadable expression. Zenfis then speaks, her voice soft but clear, revealing that she too was once a slave and understands the hardships all too well. Sei reacts with surprise. Zenfis continues, explaining that after being treated so poorly by humans for so long, she is sure this is the first time they have ever met a kind one like Sei. As Zenfis observes that this is a complicated concept, Sei processes the information with an intense focus. In her mind, the term slave crystallizes into a mechanical metaphor, a cogwheel of society. She leads the girls into a spacious dining room, but pauses, a questioning look on her face as she takes in the empty tables. Zenfis immediately apologizes on behalf of the group, explaining that as slaves, they are not permitted to sit. Confused, Sei asks what is wrong, prompting Zenfis to clarify their belief. They are not allowed to use the same table as their master. The statement hits Sei with the force of a physical blow. She is stunned, realizing with a dawning horror that she has no idea what the proper customs are for treating slaves in this world. Her mind races, recalling that in her previous life, such individuals were primarily assistants for research and labor. She admits to herself that she has no grasp of the common sense that governs this era's social structure. Zenfis, sensing her master's internal conflict, hesitantly asks if it is truly acceptable for people of their low status to sit with her. With a sudden, fierce resolve, Sei declares that it is fine. She proclaims that she will prioritize her own feelings over this world's common sense, and commands them to sit down with her. She continues her declaration to the three stunned girls, stating plainly that she respects each of them as individuals. She elaborates, acknowledging that while people normally treat slaves as mere objects, she considers them all to be her companions. The statement elicits a collective, shocked gasp from the trio. Unfazed by their reaction, Sei smiles warmly and adds that they will be the companions who travel with her from this point forward. The weight of her words begins to sink in, and the three girls can only repeat the term companions in a shared state of bewildered awe. Their shock gives way to overwhelming emotion. Daphne tearfully notes that this is the first time anyone has said something like that to them. Xanthus calls Sei a compassionate person, while Toka expresses deep gratitude for her generous thoughtfulness. Their gratitude prompts a fierce declaration from Sei. Her expression hardens as she reveals that she, too, was once treated like a slave, and because of that, treating them like objects is absolutely out of the question for her. Having made her point, her demeanor softens. She reiterates that none of them are objects, herself included, and instructs the still hesitant girls to sit down so they can all eat together. They nervously agree. Once they are all seated, she formally reintroduces herself as ISEKAI'D, an alchemist. She adds that her own predicament is just as she described it before, alluding to her past from 500 years ago and her human nature. She then shifts the focus, expressing a desire to learn about them. She asks them to share their strengths, reassuring them that she has used the slave-master contract to magically prevent them from revealing these details to anyone else. With their privacy secured, she invites Toka to begin, who proudly introduces herself and declares confidence in her physical strength. Toka elaborates, explaining that she was once a lizard man but evolved into a fire dragonkin thanks to Sei's intervention, which boosted her strength and gave her an aptitude for martial arts. Sei acknowledges this, then turns to Daphne. The rabbitkin shyly explains that she is of the Rabi race, possesses excellent hearing, can communicate with animals, and is capable of driving a horse carriage. After Daphne finishes, the last of the three girls introduces herself. With several books laid out before her, she states that her name is Xanthus Anemisjeev and that her extensive reading has given her a fair amount of knowledge. Sei mentally catalogs Xanthus's abilities, the power to link her heart with animals, the skill to drive a carriage, and knowledge of some magic. The surname, Anemisjeev, piques her curiosity. As she ponders this, Daphne and Toka lean forward from their seats beside Xanthus. They excitedly point out to Sei that Xanthus, unlike them, has a surname. Xanthus quietly confirms that she is, to be exact, a former noblewoman. The revelation causes Daphne and Toka to cry out in shock. Sei realizes the hardship Xanthus must have endured. Xanthus explains that a rebellion broke out, her father was killed, and the women and children were sold into slavery, which is how she ended up in this state. Having heard all their stories, Sei thanks them for sharing. She smiles warmly, expressing gratitude that each of them has different strengths. She humbly adds that she herself is practically useless besides making potions and would be happy to receive their help. Her companions immediately object. Xanthus, with fervent admiration, declares that Sei's healing power is far greater than that of the saint from the Heavenly Way Church, insisting there is nothing she can't do. Daphne and Toka quickly agree, adding that an honorable person must be humble. This unified praise leaves Sei completely flustered. She shuts her eyes in disbelief, wondering why they refuse to believe her own assessment of her limitations. The moment is shattered as the door bursts open. The swordsman leader rushes into the room, shouting for the young miss. Startled, Sei turns and asks him what is wrong. He looks utterly desperate, asking if she has an antidote. He begs her to sell it to him, promising to pay any price or do anything she asks. Seeing his desperation, Sei's expression turns serious. She agrees to sell it to him, but adds a condition. She looked at the desperate swordsman and stated her terms plainly. She didn't need money. Continuing, she confirmed that she could indeed make the antidote, just as she had said. The swordsman, taken aback, stammered, asking what she could possibly mean by refusing payment. Xanthus urged the leader to guide them, and he agreed, his face etched with worry. He warned them all that, despite their efforts, there was no guarantee the antidote would work. In response to his doubt, Xanthus declared that if Sei's cure failed, she would use the Heavenly Way's resurrection device. The mention of the powerful church again caught Sei by surprise. The group rushed toward the large, two-story building in the village. Bursting through a doorway, the swordsman leader shouted for someone named Philite, announcing he'd brought a capable alchemist. Sei's eyes widened in shock at the scene before her. The patient's arms were covered in dark, creeping blotches that spread across her skin like a venomous blight. Lying in bed was Philite, drenched in a feverish sweat. She weakly acknowledged how severe the poison had become as her body trembled with pain. The swordsman, whom Philite called Boris, rushed to her side. She stopped him with a faint whisper, telling him it was enough. With a pained and resigned expression, she told Boris she would accept asylum from the church. She only asked to be allowed to be revived by them. In response to her resignation, Boris clutched her hand, his voice cracking as he shouted that she couldn't give up. He stammered, unable to fully express the reason why. He collapsed by her bedside, pleading desperately that he didn't want to lose her. From behind, Sei watched the heart-wrenching scene unfold. As he grieved, Sei's expression hardened with resolve. She knew that right now, there was still something she could do. In that very moment, she acted. Alchemy workshop. Deploy, she commanded, and a complex magical apparatus materialized around her. She immediately ordered Xanthus to bring the materials they had just bought, and the girl quickly affirmed. A short while later, her work was finished. A single, ornate bottle containing a shimmering liquid stood ready. She held the vial, her brow furrowed in thought. She had made an antidote, but she had no certainty it would work. Despite the doubt, she knew it was the only thing she could do right now. Casting her uncertainty aside, her expression became one of pure determination. She had to believe in her own ability. With renewed conviction, she approached the kneeling swordsman. "Boris-san," she said, correcting his subordinate status, "please, use this." He looked up, accepting the offer cure. He took the vial and gently tilted Phyllite's head back, carefully administering the potion. As the antidote entered her system, a soft glow enveloped Phyllite's body, and she began to stir. As the last of the venom's dark markings fade from Phyllite's skin, Boris remains on his knees, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated relief. He lets out a shaky breath, thanking the heavens for her recovery. Phyllite, now sitting up and completely healed, looks on as he expresses his immense relief. As he struggles to compose himself, Phyllite voices her disbelief at the miraculous cure. Say calmly clarifies the nature of the affliction she just neutralized, a Hydra death venom. The word Hydra gives her pause. It's another term she doesn't recognize, adding to a growing list of unfamiliar words in this world. She decides there's no point dwelling on it for now. Her internal musings are interrupted by Boris, who is now on his feet and bowing deeply. He expresses his profound gratitude for saving Phyllite's life. Say, ever modest, dismisses it as nothing, while her companions look on, one of them remarking on her amazing feat. She suddenly realizes her alchemy workshop is still deployed in the middle of the street, drawing a crowd. Onlookers murmur in awe, calling her a saint and marveling at the instantaneous antidote. She knows she must close the workshop quickly. Having packed away her workshop, she begins to lead her companions away from the scene. Boris, however, calls out desperately, urging them not to leave just yet. Say, wanting to avoid further commotion, tells her group to go. He watches them disappear down the street, a sudden, panicked realization dawning on him. He hasn't paid her for the life-saving cure. Meanwhile, far from the town square, Sei and her companions reappear in a wooded area. Toka expresses her amazement, correctly identifying the instantaneous travel as teleportation magic. Zenfis agrees that the situation had become troublesome. From their vantage point on a hill, they look back at the town they just left, having been transported outside its walls in a mere instant. Having teleported to a forest clearing, Daphne expresses her confusion. Sei calmly confirms that they just used a teleportation potion. She elaborates that this was her own secret creation, a rare, high-grade potion that cannot be made simply by using a standard alchemy workshop. Furthermore, to prevent others from using it without her consent, she had applied a special sealing technique to the item. Despite the successful escape, Sei winces, lamenting what a waste it was to use such a valuable item. She admits the thought of using it during the earlier monster invasion hadn't even crossed her mind, considering it better than nothing for their current situation. As Sei frets, the perceptive Zenfis correctly deduces that the potion must have been imbued with a unique magical property. Sei confirms that this is essentially correct. She praises Zenfis for being so quick to understand. Seeing the interaction, Daphne playfully complains that it's not fair and asks for a head pat as well, which Sei happily obliges. While patting Daphne's head, Sei's thoughts turn practical. She resolves that in order to enjoy their journey peacefully, they should make an effort to avoid any more trouble. With this new resolve, she announces to the group that they will camp outside for the night. Toka enthusiastically agrees, while Zenfis points out that it will take them at least a day to reach the nearest town. Daphne listens, understanding the plan. Unbeknownst to the party, as they finalize their plans, suspicious eyes watch them from the cover of the dense bushes, their intentions a mystery. As the group travels, Daphne suddenly halts, her rabbit ears twitching. Sei turns to her, asking what is wrong. The young rabbitkin explains that she hears the cry of a beast coming from the south of the forest. In response to the potential threat, Toka's eyes light up with excitement. She strikes a confident pose, realizing this is a chance to use her newfound strength and declaring it's her time to shine. She finds a prospect reliable, though Sei seems to have some reservations. Sei voices her hesitation, asking Toka if she will be all right without a weapon. Standing beside a silent Zenfis, the dragonkin waves off the concern, confidently telling her not to worry. The dragonkin boasts that she can defeat a mere forest beast with her bare hands. As she speaks, the ground before them begins to bubble ominously. Her confident expression dissolves into shock as she stares at what is emerging from the murky pool. From the ground erupts a colossal, multi-headed serpentine monster, a hydra, which towers over the small group. They stand dwarfed and frozen before the immense creature. The creature's numerous heads writhe and turn, their cold, reptilian eyes locking onto the four girls below. The sight fills Zenfis, Toka, and Daphne with sheer terror, their faces paling as they stare up at the monster. Toka's bravado shatters completely. She frantically urges Sei to flee, admitting that even she cannot possibly defeat this monster barehanded. Zenfis recognizes the beast, identifying it as the hydra that had been plaguing the adventurers they encountered before. While her companions panic, Sei remains surprisingly calm. She looks upon the Hydra and acknowledges that defeating it barehanded is indeed impossible, yet her thought trails off, suggesting another possibility. Her calm demeanor shifts to confident resolve. As Daphne and Xenphis try to pull a stunned Toka to safety, Sei turns to them with a smile. She tells them not to run, seeing this not as a threat, but as a perfect opportunity to gather materials. With a determined, "Let's go," she steps forward to face the beast. As Sei declared her intention to fight, Toka reacted with pure alarm, shouting at her and demanding to know what she was thinking, exclaiming that the situation was far too dangerous. Her companions quickly echoed her sentiment. Xenphis and Daphne, trembling, agreed that it was far too dangerous, insisting that the Hydra was not a simple opponent to be trifled with. Their frantic warnings, however, only seemed to confuse Sei. She looked from one worried face to the next, genuinely puzzled by their intense reactions. She turned her attention back to the Hydra, considering their fear. She understood they were worried for her sake, but she couldn't comprehend why they were so afraid of a creature like this. Deciding that actions would speak louder than words, she prepared her tools. She firmly grasped a small, ornate bottle of potion as a glowing, square-shaped platform materialized above her other hand. With a determined expression, she declared she would demonstrate her intent through her actions, uncorking the potion and releasing its contents in a brilliant spray toward the massive beast. The magical mist enveloped the Hydra's many heads, and in an instant, they began to shrink, deflating with a series of soft hisses. The once terrifying monster was reduced to a fraction of its size, its now miniature heads scurrying away through the tall grass. Her companions could only stare in stunned silence. Daphne uttered Toka's name, but all three girls were otherwise speechless, their expressions frozen in utter astonishment. A moment later, Sei turned back to them, holding up a large jar containing the now tiny Hydra. She called out that it was trying to escape and that they needed to capture it alive, seemingly oblivious to the profound shock she had just induced. She holds up the jar containing the shrunken Hydra and gives a cheerful confirmation, while her companions, Toka, Xenphis, and Daphne, stare from behind, their faces frozen in disbelief. Inside the glass, the multi-headed beast, now no larger than a common lizard, squirms harmlessly as the lid is secured with a definitive clink. Her companions are still processing the event. Toka mutters that while it won't serve as food, they've at least acquired valuable materials. Xenphis, observing her friend's stunned silence, asks what's wrong with them. The shock finally gives way to elation. Daphne and Toka erupt in cheers, with Daphne shouting how incredible it is. Toka marvels that Sei defeated the giant venomous snake in a single blow. Xenphis remains quiet, her expression one of pure astonishment. Xenphis, her composure slowly returning, turns to Sei with a direct question. She asks how she managed it, speculating if it was some form of high-level holy magic. Sei offers a surprisingly simple explanation. She reveals that she just threw an antidote potion on it. The potion neutralized the poison that coated the creature, which in turn caused it to shrink. Even with the explanation, Xenphis is still in awe, thinking to herself that defeating a Hydra is an incredible feat regardless. Sei continues, adding that her master had captured many of these venomous snakes before, so she already knew the proper method to deal with them. As she finishes her story, Sei stands with an air of casual confidence, her back to her friends, completely unfazed by the extraordinary power she just displayed. She turns back to the group, her mind already on the next task. She cheerfully announces that since the snake is inedible, they should look for other food, adding that she's counting on them. The three girls respond with a unified, enthusiastic agreement. Several days later, the group arrives at the nearby town of Mitsuk, a sizable settlement built around a prominent central tower. In a back alley of Mitsuk, Sei examines a vial containing a local potion. She observes its murky contents, remarking that in her era, they would have called this muddy water. Daphne, looking concerned, asks if it's truly so different from the potions of 500 years ago, questioning if it could even heal a simple scratch. Zai quietly confirms her doubts. As she walks through the town, she reflects on the troubling signs. Potions are only sold in back alleys, and she is yet to see a single alchemist. The absence is conspicuous. The thought crystallizes into a disturbing conclusion. It is as if potion-making technology has been deliberately and forcibly made to regress. A realization dawns on her, and she stops in her tracks, murmuring, "Wait." Her expression hardens with resolve. She decides that this mystery is not her concern. Her goal is a carefree journey, and she will not poke her nose into unnecessary trouble. With that, she concludes her information gathering. Having made her decision, she turns and calls out to her companions, announcing it's time to regroup with Xenphis, Toka, and Daphne, who are out on a shopping trip. The group reunites in the street. Toka asks if Sei is all right, and she gives a simple confirmation. Suddenly, a small girl carrying a basket collides with someone, spilling her cookies all over the cobblestones. The girl apologizes profusely for the accident. Sei, however, smiles warmly, telling the child not to worry and offering to buy all the dropped cookies as compensation. She then turns to Xenphis, asking her to handle the payment. Sei explains that she is entrusting all financial matters to the smart Xenphis, as she herself is unfamiliar with current market prices. Zenfis accepts the task. While Zenfis arranges the payment, Sei kneels to help gather the scattered treats, deciding to sample one for herself in the process. She takes a bite of the cookie, and an electrifying shock of flavor courses through her. Her eyes widen in disbelief. Overwhelmed by the taste, she exclaims how delicious it is. She marvels at the incredible flavor, wondering how it's possible when it seems to contain no special ingredients. She realizes this must be a secret family recipe and becomes determined to meet the baker and learn their secret. Turning her attention to the young girl, Sei asks if she was the one who made the cookies. The child shakes her head, explaining her mother made them. A woman with pointed ears appears nearby. Seizing the opportunity, Sei asks if the girl could introduce her to her mother, explaining that she absolutely must learn the recipe. The woman with pointed ears steps forward, confirming she is the mother. She asks the girl, her daughter, if she was out selling the cookies all by herself in her stead. Her daughter nods in confirmation. As she observes the exchange between mother and daughter, Sei senses there is a story behind this. She looks from the girl to her mother, a thoughtful expression on her face. Her mind made up, she looks toward their home in the distance. She asks if they would be willing to take her there. She clarifies her request with a bright smile, explaining that she wants to speak with the mother and, of course, learn the recipe for the delicious cookies. In response to the request, the mother gently places a hand on her daughter's head. The little girl looks up at her, her eyes welling with tears, seemingly relieved. Having led them to their home, the mother agrees to Sei's request. As the door swings open, the little girl rushes inside, happily announcing to her mother that she is home. Sei and the woman follow her in. Inside their home, the elven woman is racked by a deep, rattling cough. As she struggles to compose herself, Sei explains that she's a traveler who found the cookies so delicious she simply had to learn the recipe. The mother, still weak, asks if she is a customer. Her daughter observes the exchange, realizing with some surprise that this person isn't interested in business, but is driven by a genuine passion for the craft itself. The mother's coughing fit returns, more severe this time, causing her daughter to cry out in concern. The woman clutches her chest, understanding that her body has become so weak it can no longer accept nourishment. Suddenly, the woman doubles over, overcome by a violent, hacking cough. "Mother!" Her daughter screams as Sei and her companions look on, startled by the sudden crisis. Her alarm instantly shifts to determination. Seeing the severity of the woman's condition, Sei knows she must intervene immediately. She quickly considers her options, thinking that above all else, a recovery potion might be the only thing that can heal the woman. The thought is immediately followed by a more pressing concern. It would be a tragedy for such delicious cookies to be lost to the world forever. Declaring such a loss unacceptable, she summons her power with a shout, instantly deploying her magical alchemy workshop. In a flash of light, a vial containing a sparkling liquid appears. Sei holds it out to the bewildered woman, telling her to drink it. She insists with commanding urgency, pointing emphatically and telling her to drink it down, now. She watches intently as the cookie seller's mother, propped up in bed, drinks the potion down to the last drop. The little girl looks on, calling out to her mother with hopeful concern. The effect is instantaneous and violent. With a guttural roar, the frail body erupts with power. Muscles swell and expand, shredding the simple nightclothes as the figure bursts with newfound strength. As the transformation settles, a powerfully built figure with a full head of hair bellows triumphantly. Sei and her companions, Daphne, Zenfis, and Toka, can only stare, their faces a mask of pure shock at the unbelievable outcome. The little girl, far from being frightened, leaps with joy into the muscular arms of her parent, crying out, "Mother!" The figure, now clearly a man, catches her in a tight embrace, booming, "My daughter!" While the two share a happy reunion, Daphne leans over to the still stunned Sei. She whispers, questioning how the mother could be a man. Daphne reasons that he must have been acting as a substitute for the girl's mother. The pieces click into place for Sei. The person she thought was a gaunt woman was, in fact, a man who had wasted away. And he was also the mother. The logic is strange, but she begins to understand. His reunion with his daughter momentarily paused. The healed man turns his attention to Sei. He bows his head slightly, his voice filled with emotion as he offers his profound thanks. He then explains the nature of his terrible affliction. He had been struck by a basilisk's petrifying gaze, a rare disease that was slowly turning his body to stone from the inside out. With a powerful flex that emphasizes his restored physique, the father joyfully declares that he has made a full recovery. Sei watches him, a little dumbfounded by the sheer energy of the display. She thinks to herself that it's wonderful he's healed, but internally admits that she has trouble dealing with such intensely muscular figures. A faint blush dusts her cheeks as she feels overwhelmed. She's taken aback when a now healthy, muscular man insists on repaying her. Flustered, Sei suggests he could teach her the recipe for his cookies in return. In response, the man enthusiastically flexes his biceps, causing Sei to recoil with a look of pure shock. Her mind races with a horrifying realization. This muscular man was the mother who baked those cookies. She panics, wondering if the secret ingredient was not some hidden flavor, but sheer muscle power. The thought crosses her mind that even with the recipe, she might never be able to reproduce them. While she's lost in this internal crisis, a small hand tugs at her sleeve. The little girl calls out to get her attention, pulling her back to the present moment. The girl beams with a bright, joyous smile, thanking Sei from the bottom of her heart for healing her parent. Seeing the child's pure happiness, Sei is momentarily speechless. A soft realization dawns on her. A little girl's smile is priceless. She decides it doesn't matter, concluding that all's well that ends well. Outside the cookie seller's home, Sei lets out a small cry of admiration for the building. Inside, the young cookie seller is utterly captivated by Daphne's rabbit ears, reaching out to touch them. She exclaims how cute they are and asks if they really move, to which Daphne happily confirms they do. Sei, Xanthus, and Toka watch the sweet interaction with smiles. The girl's father, his muscular form restored, looks at Sei with intense gratitude. He declares that he doesn't know how he could possibly repay her for what she has done. He is taken aback when Sei politely refuses any form of payment. She insists that what she did was nothing significant, momentarily fumbling and addressing him as mother before correcting herself. His expression shows his surprise at her humility. The man's shoulders slump, clearly pained by the thought of not being able to properly thank his benefactor. Seeing his dejection, a new idea suddenly strikes Sei. She then asks if he might know of a place where they, as travelers, could purchase an animal for transport to pull their wagon. His entire demeanor shifts. A wide, confident grin spreads across his face as he declares that he can guide them to a merchant he knows personally. As the plan is settled, the little girl throws her arms around Daphne in a tight hug. Watching them, Sei formally accepts the man's offer, asking him to please lead the way. While the group prepares to leave, the cookie seller's daughter waves goodbye from the doorway. Sei turns to Daphne and gently asks if she is okay with the parting, concerned it might be a sad farewell. She responds with a radiant, joyful smile, reassuring Sei completely. Daphne declares that she's fine because she has her big sisters with her. The young rabbitkin, Daphne, looks up at Sei with adoration, calling her big sis and exclaiming how cute and soothing she is. Their guide, the father of the cookie seller, gestures toward a grand building, announcing that this is the Silver Phoenix Merchant Association. As the group stands before the impressive structure, Sei marvels at its size, recalling that the Silver Phoenix Association was active even 500 years prior. A young man in a suit rushes out, greeting the father warmly as an old acquaintance. After a brief exchange, the man learns Sei is the one his benefactor mentioned and graciously ushers her and her companions inside. Inside, he leads them to a clean, spacious stable. With a proud gesture, he presents a herd of elegant, four-legged beasts, declaring that every earth dragon here is a first-class specimen. He explains that these are a type of dragon specialized for running and invites Sei to take whichever one she desires. Sei is stunned by the offer, questioning if he truly means for free. Her companions, meanwhile, react with pure delight. The young man, who is the guild master, clarifies his motive. He explains that he is deeply indebted to the man Sei saved, as his help was instrumental in him becoming guild master. As repayment to his benefactor's savior, he wants to gift her amount. Overwhelmed by the gesture, Sei is momentarily speechless before formally accepting his generous offer of an earth dragon. With the matter settled, Sei turns to Daphne. Remembering the girl's unique talent, she asks her to choose which animal they should take. Daphne's hand shoots up as she responds with a cheerful yes. She looked upon the two earth dragons in the enclosure. The guild master's voice instructed her to choose the one that seemed to have the most spirit. Her face brightened with resolve. Clenching her fists, she declared that she would do her very best for her big sis. The stables were a grand, open-air structure, its roof held aloft by a series of massive stone pillars under a clear sky. As she approached, one of the dragons immediately nuzzled against her. Daphne explained that the creature was incredibly motivated by the sight of their party. The creature sniffed the air with an intense look. Noticing the exchange, Sei quietly asked Daphne what the dragon was saying. Daphne relayed the dragon's thoughts, reporting that it was excited about a harem party with so many girls. Internally, however, the dragon's true feeling was that it did not want to be chosen. Sei, however, was not put off. She informed the guildmaster that they would take this one, reasoning that even a lecherous attitude was a form of motivation. The man was taken aback, asking if she was certain, as the beast was a known, untamable ruffian. She turned to the creature, stating she thought it would be fine. The dragon flinched in surprise as she gave it a nickname, Chi-chan, the diminutive of Chiryu, the word for earth dragon. The young girl quickly translated the dragon's delight, exclaiming that it found the name excellent and was ultra pleased. The guild master could only mutter, "I see," as he processed the bizarre interaction. He watched her, realizing with admiration that the Lady Saint was not only a master alchemist, but also an excellent judge of character, even when it came to beasts. As she stands with her companions, the guild master continues his effusive praise, dismissing the idea that she is a saint. He insists she is an alchemist, yet simultaneously claims that no alchemist capable of curing a basilisk petrification even exists, a clear attempt at humble flattery. She listens with a growing sense of irritation, thinking to herself that such an alchemist is standing right in front of him. Her thoughts are interrupted as a woman approaches the guild master, bowing deeply. The woman addresses Sei directly as Lady Saint, pleading with her. The petitioner asks if she might spare some of the holy water that cured the basilisk's petrification. Internally, Sei bristles at the term, knowing it was just a potion, but decides it's not worth correcting the misconception and agrees to help. In response, she materializes her portable alchemy workshop with a simple gesture, its sudden appearance startling the onlookers. The magical device immediately begins its work, rapidly producing dozens of glass vials filled with shimmering, potent-looking liquid. Moments later, with a table now covered in potions, Sei presents them to the guildmaster. He thanks her profusely and begins to ask about the fee, but she quickly cuts him off, stating that payment isn't necessary. With a bright, magnanimous smile, she declares that the potions are free. She encourages him to sell them or give them away to anyone in need. The guildmaster is overwhelmed with gratitude. She then explains her logic. Low-grade potions are simple for her to create. If she were to sell them, it would invite all sorts of questions about her methods. However, if they are accepted as a gift of goodwill, no one will pursue the matter further. A sly, satisfied expression crosses her face as she concludes her internal monologue. This, she thinks, is a much less troublesome way to handle things. The day begins under a clear sky, with the sun shining down on the architecture of a town square. In that square, she stands before a covered wagon, making final arrangements. She turns to Zenfis, entrusting her with the care of Daphne for the journey. From within the wagon, Toka declares that she will serve as their guard, while Daphne smiles brightly. Zenfis, standing before Sei, gives a firm yes in response. She then asks Zenfis, who is kneeling before her, if she is certain she can handle the reins. The reason for the arrangement is Daphne, who is joyfully hugging one of the large, wolf-like beasts pulling the wagon. She explains that since she can communicate with animals, she'll get along with them just fine. Toka, meanwhile, holds the other set of reins, prepared for any danger that might arise. Sei then turns her full attention back to Zenfis. Looking up with earnest eyes, Zenfis declares that Sei's knowledge will be a great help to everyone. Sei acknowledges this, reflecting that it must have been a difficult journey for Zenfis to have come all this way alone. The girl simply agrees, but Sei thinks of herself, it is thanks to these girls, Daphne, Zenfis, and Toka, that her own journey has become so much easier. She found herself momentarily overwhelmed. Her companions, though dear, were a handful. Daphne questioned eating with her hands, while Zenfis and Toka complained of being too tired to walk. Sei sighed internally. Looking after everyone was proving to be quite the task. From her seat on the back of the wagon, however, Zenfis offered a different perspective, smiling warmly as she spoke. It was better, she insisted, for them all to be together. Her simple, heartfelt words caused a gentle smile to bloom on Sei's face. With renewed spirits, she gave the command for their departure. The wagon began to move, setting off on what she declared would be a fun journey, a sentiment echoed by the cheers of her friends. Several days later, in a different town, the swordsman Boris was growing anxious. He scanned the streets, muttering that the young miss he was looking for should have arrived by now, yet he could find no trace of her. As he sat dejectedly on a barrel, a voice called out, mistaking him for a woman. He turned to find Phyllite approaching him. She closed the distance, her gaze intense. She asked if he was Boris, then added a title that made him freeze, a follower of the White Silver Saintess. Before he could process the question, Phylite's demeanor shifted. With a sharp ring of steel, she drew her sword. I just wanted to say thank you to that young miss, she said, her voice tight with emotion. She thrust the blade toward his throat, her eyes blazing. Are you the Saintess? She demanded. She recounted the incredible feats she'd witnessed, how the Saintess had not only defeated the Hydra, but had also predicted the coming of the corpse-eating flower in this very town. Her words echoed the growing legend. Had he not heard the stories? The tale of the great deed performed by one who left behind a miraculous potion, free of charge, to cure all the people of their ailments. Confronted by Phyllite, Boris can only offer a simple agreement, as she passionately declares that the Saintess is a wonderfully compassionate person. He remains seated on a barrel while she stands over him, her expression intense as she recalls her savior's kindness. His mind, however, is racing, cataloging the incredible feats he has witnessed. The healing power that saved a near-dead Phyllite, the strength to effortlessly neutralize Hydra poison, and even the ability to cure the fatal toxin of the death-eating flower for a large group of people. He recalls the radiant figure, concluding that her power far surpasses that of the official Saintess of the Tended Church. This is precisely why his own guildmaster has ordered him to find the young miss. From her behavior, he deduces she likely has no affiliation with the Tended Church. As he sits, lost in thought, a cascade of questions fills his mind. Who is she? Where did she come from? And how did she acquire such immense power? Meanwhile, in a nearby tavern, other adventurers voice their own frustrations, complaining that the trail of the White Silver Saintess has gone completely cold in this town. As Boris and Phyllite take a moment to rest at a table, a young girl approaches them. She asks if they know of a person with silver hair, someone who felt just like a saintess, much to Boris's visible exhaustion. Startled, Boris leans back as the girl suddenly gets closer, her expression earnest and unwavering. Ignoring his reaction, she beams with a bright smile and explains that this person saved her mother. She adds that the person had mentioned they were going somewhere. Leaning in with renewed hope, Boris and Philite listen intently as the girl struggles to recall a name, stammering, Ain, Animos. He listens as the elf woman clarifies the name, Animos Give. Philite is taken aback by the new information. Boris processes this, recalling that Animos Give is indeed the name of the elf country located to the southwest. Galvanized by the lead, Philite dashes towards the door, announcing that they are heading for the elf country at once. Let's go, Boris, she calls, urging him to follow. As he prepares to follow, the large man who runs the establishment stops him. He leans in, asking if Boris would be willing to deliver a message to the young lady he is pursuing. He continues, explaining that he has seen many holy nights from the tended church around town lately. He speculates that the church itself has begun searching for the young lady, then questions whether she is even affiliated with them at all. His expression grows grim as he elaborates on his warning. He advises Boris to be careful, theorizing that the church resents the young lady for helping people without charge and may view her as an obstacle to be eliminated. Boris considers the man's words, acknowledging the grim logic. He agrees, noting that the church is indeed an organization that profits from its supposed holy power. Turning to depart, Boris thanks the man for his timely warning. The man and his young daughter wave goodbye as he rushes out. Meanwhile, on a road far away, Sei travels in a wagon pulled by a horned, deer-like creature. She's accompanied by Toka, Daphne, and Xenphis. As they journey, a heartfelt plea for the young miss to remain safe echoes, while an uneasy premonition of trouble ahead hangs in the air. The wagon carrying Sei and her companions comes to an abrupt halt under the blinding sun of the desolate wasteland. As the intense heat bears down on them, Daphne and Xenphis groan in discomfort. Seeing their distress, Sei instructs the three of them to rest inside the wagon's canopy while she takes a turn. Toka, however, remains full of energy, proudly stating that as a fire dragonkin, she is fine. Daphne, meanwhile, is completely drained and told to get some rest. Stepping out into a sliver of shade, Sei surveys the vast, arid canyon. She muses that while she had heard of the dangers of this wasteland, she hadn't anticipated the sheer intensity of the heat. A young elf girl with short, dark hair approaches her, her expression serious. She directly questions Sei, asking if she is truly certain about making the elf country their destination. From inside the wagon, Daphne wonders aloud if Xenphis might have family in the elf country. Xenphis clarifies that the nation beyond this wasteland is known as Animos Give. The elf girl elaborates on the peril, explaining that this territory is heavily populated with vicious monsters. Because of this, she reveals, it has earned the ominous moniker, the Outsider's Demonic Realm. She continues, explaining that standard procedure for crossing this region involves traveling with a well-guarded caravan, hiring powerful adventurers for protection against the constant threats. Standing alone with Sei in the vast, empty landscape, the elf girl reiterates her concern. She asks once more if Sei is absolutely certain about their chosen path to the elf country. Her gaze is firm and unwavering. She reflects internally that while Sei has consistently shown a mature and resolute attitude since they first met, this particular choice feels different to her. She gripped the fabric of her tunic, her knuckles turning white. It was a clear attempt to appear strong, to hold herself together against the strain. Sei noticed the subtle tension, her thoughts drifting back to the reason for her resolve. She had seen the elf crying just once in the dead of night, and it looked as if she was forcing herself to endure. The memory was clear. She had concluded that the elf must be terribly lonely. That was the moment Sei decided she would take her all the way to the elf country. Snapping back to the present, Sei beamed with unwavering confidence and declared loudly, "It's okay." She then turned her attention to the oppressive heat of the wasteland. "We'll manage this too," she announced, as the magical gears of her alchemy workshop materialized around them. From the swirling light, a faceted bottle appeared, frost gathering on its surface. It was a specially made cooling potion. Sei offered the potion to the elf companion, urging her to drink, while also providing more for Toka and Xenphis. The elf took a sip, and her eyes widened as a wave of coolness washed over her. Aboard their large, deer-like mount, Daphne and Toka cheered with delight. "Wow, it's so cool. Amazing," Daphne exclaimed, refreshed and energetic. The physical relief gave the elf companion a moment for introspection. She knew there was no guarantee her family was even in the elf country, but it was the only lead she might have. She turned to face Sei directly. She admitted that she was also curious about the elf country itself, and that following Sei was, in a way, her own selfish desire. As the elf companion stands before her, Sei offers gentle reassurance. She tells the elf not to feel burdened, and to simply guide her to her homeland. In response, the elf asks if it is truly all right for her to be taken along. Her voice filled with a hopeful tremor as Sei's hand extends an invitation. With a bright, unwavering smile, Sei confirms her decision, enthusiastically declaring, "So, let's go." The elf is left momentarily speechless by the earnest invitation. Her silence breaks into a radiant smile as she grasps Sei's hands, joyfully accepting with a simple, heartfelt. Yes. A short while later, as they walk beside a supply wagon, the elf companion turns to Sei, mentioning that she has a couple of questions. She first asks about the duration of the demon warding potion. Sei looks thoughtful, admitting that while it should last a long time, she has never actually checked. She quickly adds that if it seems to be wearing off, she can simply reapply it, leaving the elf to ponder this casual display of immense alchemical power. The elf then voices her second concern, asking about their provisions and if they have a plan for resupply during the long journey. Sei's expression becomes sharp and confident. She declares that everything is fine, because the Sage's Tower is nearby. She had mentioned the Sage's Tower, and now it stood before them. A colossal, spiraling structure of white stone piercing the very clouds. The elf companion stared up at it in awe, asking if this was truly the place. Sei confirmed with a smile that this was her master's workshop. As they stepped through the grand entrance, the elf companion remarked that climbing such a high tower would be an arduous task. Sei explained that her master had a tendency to wander, and so had workshops like this in many different places. Her companion's worried expressions prompted Toka to ask if there was a portal. With a confident grin, Sei assured them that there was, so they had nothing to worry about. She then elaborated for Toka's benefit, describing the portal as a device for teleporting to a specific location. However, she added it was a mechanism that only her master and their disciples could operate. A thought then crossed her mind, a flicker of nostalgia as she wondered how all her old acquaintances were doing. The realization struck her just as quickly. 500 years had passed. Pushing the somber thought aside, she led the group further into the grand hall. She mused aloud that since some of her former companions were of long-lived races, there was a chance she might see them again. Their path led them to a chamber dominated by a glowing, intricate circle on the floor. The elf companion asked what it was, and Sei identified it as the transfer portal, instructing her to step onto it. She elaborated on its function, explaining that when her master or a disciple infused the master sign with magic, it created a mechanism to fly to the top in an instant. With the explanation complete, she turned back to her companions, gesturing eagerly. "Come on, everyone, get on, she urged, ready to activate the device. She and her companions are enveloped in a brilliant flash of light as the ancient portal roars to life, lifting them from the ground. The sudden transition leaves them amidst a field of glowing flowers. Daphne exclaims how beautiful it is, while Xenphus is left speechless with awe. Their ascent is swift and dizzying. They find themselves rising rapidly alongside the tower, realizing with astonishment that a garden exists at this incredible height. Watching her friend's amazement, Sei explains with a fond smile that her master simply likes high places, which is why they built their workshop in such an absurdly elevated location. She then mutters to herself, a flicker of annoyance crossing her face. The saying that fools and the like are fond of high places comes to mind, comparing them to her master. Their journey concludes before a small, quaint cottage nestled in a rooftop garden. Sei points to it, announcing that this is her master's workshop. As her companions look on, she clarifies her intentions. She plans to borrow the workshop to create high-grade potions, which possess effects far exceeding those of the ordinary potions they typically use. Daphne makes the connection, realizing this must be related to the teleportation potion Sei used previously. With her plan stated, Sei turns towards the workshop, ready to proceed. However, as she prepares to enter, the door opens to reveal a figure waiting inside. A young woman in a maid's uniform, with dark horns and a tail, stands with a placid, expectant expression. The maid stands silently, her presence blocking the entrance to the workshop, her purpose for being there a complete mystery. The maid with the horn-like headdress stood with perfect posture, her hands clasped before her. With a calm, even voice, she introduced herself simply as Church. As her companions looked on, Sei stared at the figure, a realization dawning. She wondered what Church could be, and then it struck her, a magical doll. Not just any doll, but a high-performance maid model that her own master had created. While Sei grappled with this revelation, Daphne, completely unaware of the potential threat, moved closer. She gazed up at the doll with pure admiration, remarking on what a pretty maid she was. Daphne's innocent advance sent a jolt of panic through Sei. Realizing the imminent danger, her voice rang out in a desperate shout, ordering Daphne to get back. Her warning came too late. Sei's eyes widened in horror as Daphne stood confused, just inches away from the seemingly placid automaton. In that instant, Church's placid facade vanished. Her expression hardened, and with a swift movement, she lifted her skirt to reveal two enormous machine guns, their muzzles aimed directly at the party. Sei gasped, shouting a warning that the doll had pulled weapons from under her skirt. "Machine guns! Toka-chan!" she cried. Toka, her gaze sharp, immediately responded, vowing to protect them and accepting the command. Faster than the eye could follow, Toka's powerful, scaled tail shot out, wrapping securely around the barrel of the nearest weapon. The intervention didn't stop the assault. Church opened fire, unleashing a deafening barrage from both weapons that filled the air with muzzle flashes. But the bullets met an unseen barrier. Toka stood her ground, her voice ringing with the name of her technique, Dragon's Circle Flash, as she nullified the attack. She stands firm, her draconic body absorbing the relentless barrage of gunfire. The impacts explode against her form, but she holds her ground, shielding her companions from the deadly assault. The combat doll, Church, maintains a cold, impassive expression as she continues her attack. In stark contrast, a defiant smirk plays on Toka's lips, her eyes narrowed with fierce determination as she endures the onslaught. The sheer force of the continuous gunfire batters Toka's body, but she remains an unyielding wall between the attacker and her friends. Huddled behind their protector, Zenfis cries out to Sei in confusion. She asks why one of her master's own magical dolls would attack Sei, the master's apprentice. Daphne shivers in fear beside them. A voice cuts through the chaos, its tone detached and clear. It explains its actions with a simple declaration. Because I am the master's caretaker. The words hang in the air as Zenfis and Daphne stare, their eyes wide with stunned disbelief. Sei clarifies the doll's chilling logic for her companions. She explains that to Church, anyone other than her master is irrelevant and can be dismissed. Daphne trembles, clutching Sei, ISEKAI'D in terror. Church stands ready, her weapons aimed, a memory of her master's command echoing in her programming. Eliminate any intruders, even if they are an apprentice. Below, the party looks up, finally understanding the terrifying, unwavering nature of the magical doll's purpose. A massive weapon fires a powerful blast. The projectile explodes, engulfing Sei and her companions, Toka, Daphne, and Zenfis, in a concussive force. Toka grunts, bracing against the relentless impact. The elf companion observes the relentless assault, noting that the attacker shows no signs of running out of ammunition, which should be finite. Toka, frustrated, exclaims that she's using all her strength just to defend against the attacks. The elf companion identifies the power at play, construction magic. From a distance, Sei calmly explains the nature of this ability. She clarifies that, in simple terms, it is the power to create matter from magical energy. The source of this power is revealed, a special-grade magical doll named Church, a masterpiece created by Nicholas Flamel. As long as her magic doesn't run out, she can continue to create projectiles indefinitely, and her magical reserves are described as limitless. She is a humanoid weapon possessing power greater than any human. The elf companion stares in disbelief at the doll, Church, effortlessly wielding two massive machine guns. She questions how such slender arms can handle the recoil of those weapons. Sei looks on, a worried expression on her face as she processes the situation. On the front line, Toka digs her heels in, gritting her teeth as she struggles to maintain her defensive stance against the unending barrage. Seeing her companion at her limit, Sei steps forward. Thank you, Toka-chan, she says. I'll take it from here. Toka turns in surprise, calling out to her master. Toka expresses her gratitude and warns Sei to be careful. Sei simply replies that it will be all right. With a confident smile, Sei turns towards the battle. She projects a small, cube-like object from her hand and declares, "Believe in me." As Sei moves forward, Toka and the elf companion watch her go. Toka remains silent, a look of concern and uncertainty on her face. As the magical doll Church brandishes her heavy weapon, Sei's voice identifies the opponent's primary strength, its precision automatic fire. In response, she reveals her countermeasure, declaring that this is precisely why she has brought a smoke potion. A thick cloud of smoke instantly erupts, obscuring the battlefield. Church fires a burst into the haze, but Sei's voice explains that precision shooting is useless if the enemy cannot be seen. However, as Church continues her assault, a second potion bottle smashes against the stone ground with a sharp crack. Unfazed, the doll announces that she can still attack, as she possesses a function to detect her enemy's heat signature through the smoke. A confident smile spreads across Sei's face. She has already accounted for this, revealing that her true plan is already in motion. Suddenly, Church is drenched in a thick, sticky liquid, the contents of the second potion splattering across her body and weapon. The doll seizes up, her limbs locking in place. With a triumphant grin, Sei explains that it was an adhesive potion designed to seep into her joints and render her immobile. In the background, her companions watch, stunned. From their vantage point, Sei's friends erupt in cheers. Toka declares her victory, while Daphne cries out in awe at how amazing her big sis is. Later, a curious Zenfis asks when Sei threw the second potion. Sei clarifies that she tossed it straight up into the air at the same time she deployed the smokescreen, allowing it to fall on Church from above. With the doll neutralized, Zenfis expresses her admiration for Sei's brilliant tactics. Sei explains that once Church switched to heat-sensing mode, she became unable to track targets that lacked body heat. Following her explanation, her companions rush forward. Toka, Zenfis, and Daphne pull her into a tight group hug, overjoyed. Sei smiles warmly, thanking them and saying she could only succeed because they were all there to support her. In the embrace, Daphne beams with pure happiness, while Toka appears flustered but relieved. Zenfis, however, looks off to the side with a more thoughtful expression. The group starts to walk away. As they go, Sei glances back at the frozen form of Church and finds herself thinking that the doll is surprisingly cute. Their departure is interrupted by a new voice. A woman with long, light hair and pointed ears appears, a wide, knowing smile on her face as she declares it's time for a lecture. Her heeled shoes click decisively on the cobblestones as she strides toward them. Without hesitation, she reaches out and firmly grasps Sei's arm, bringing the young alchemist to a halt. The sudden, bold action causes Toka, Daphne, and Zenfis to gasp in unison, their faces a mask of shock and alarm. The woman holds Sei's arm, ignoring the others. A confused Sei looks up at her as Zenfis demands to know what she's doing. The woman simply addresses Sei with a single, unexpected word, Master. She then points to the back of the inert doll, Church. She explains that there is an emergency stop button located there, and she is merely going to fix a small malfunction. Her eyes, wide with a mixture of emotions, blink slowly. A silent acknowledgement passes. She then kneels formally before Sei, her head bowed in submission. With Church lying deactivated nearby, the elf woman quietly states her compliance. Taking command of the situation, Sei instructs Toka to use a potion to dissolve the adhesive binding the elf, and then to carry her. Toka acknowledges the order. She leads the way to a nearby building, remarking that for the workshop of a great alchemist, its exterior appears quite modest and unassuming. As they reach the entrance, Sei places her hand near the door, causing a magical sigil to flare to life. The heavy wooden door creaks open, much to the astonishment of Toka, Daphne, and Zenfis. The door swings open to reveal an interior of breathtaking opulence. A massive, impossibly intricate crystal chandelier glitters from the high ceiling, filling the space with sparkling light, eliciting a gasp of awe. Stepping inside, the contrast is stark. The grand hall is vast and ornate, with polished floors and a majestic staircase, a world away from the simple stone building they saw outside. She turns to her companions and gives instructions. Toka is to accompany her to the second floor with their new charge. She suggests Daphne and the others rest, but Daphne, her curiosity piqued, insists on coming along. Seeing their interest, Sei smiles and welcomes them to join. With that settled, the group proceeds down a wide, striped hallway. Sei, followed by Toka and Daphne, comes to a halt before a large, framed portrait hanging on the wall. The painting depicts a strikingly beautiful woman with long, flowing light hair. Zenfis asks who she is, questioning if this could be Nicholas Flamel. Sei gazes at the portrait and confirms with two simple words, "My master." In response to the elf creator's shocked expression, Sei calmly states that she doesn't have an answer for her right now. She elaborates, advising the elf not to think too deeply about it. Her master, she explains, is someone whose appearance, gender, and even disposition are in constant flux. With that cryptic explanation offered, Sei leads the elf creator through a set of double doors, deeper into the workshop. They enter a vast, book-lined chamber filled with alchemical equipment. Sei immediately gives an instruction, telling Toka to place the inert maid doll on the large central table. The doll is placed firmly onto the tabletop as her anxious creator looks on from the side. Sei begins her work. As her hand hovers over the doll's chest, a complex, glowing magical circuit diagram materializes in the air above her. The elf creator, seeing the intricate display, asks what it is. Sei explains that it is the doll's core formula, the very contents of her mind. She begins to diagnose the problem, her fingers tracing the lines of light. She identifies errors in the formula and states that all that's left is to supply the fuel by pouring in her own magical power. As the magic flows into the doll, her face twitches slightly, a sign of the process taking effect. A moment later, the doll sits up abruptly. Looking around the room, she speaks her first words, "It's been a while." Her creator stares, wide-eyed with astonishment. The newly awakened doll offered a polite greeting to Lady Sei'Fault. Sei, a wide smile on her face, mused aloud that it must have been about 500 years. The doll then stated her own name, Church. Her creator, the elf, interjected with a precise correction, stating that it had, in fact, been 500 years, 265 days, 14 hours, 53 minutes, and 26 seconds. With a cheerful clap, she announced it was time for a formal reintroduction. She gestured towards the doll, presenting Church as her master's personal caretaker, a magical maid doll. In response, Sei's companions introduced themselves one by one. Toka announced her name with gusto, followed by a simple declaration from Daphne, and then Zenfis. Internally, Zenfis marveled at how incredibly human-like the doll appeared. The elf creator then asked Church what orders her previous master had given her. Turning to the others, she explained that while Church looks human, as a magical doll, she still requires food and sleep, though she admitted the doll can be rather inflexible. She recalled the simple, direct command she had given Church long ago, "Protect this place." And that was the entirety of the order. Sei, processing this, remarked on how incredibly vague the command was. She then turned to Church and asked how many years it had been since her master had last visited. From across the room, Church's voice echoed back with the answer, 502 years. She remains silent, her gaze lowered as she processes the weight of her long vigil. Sei looks upon her with gentle sympathy, murmuring that it must have been very difficult to shift the heavy atmosphere. Sei claps her hands together decisively, startling Church with the sudden change in tone as she announces, right then, she turns to the entire group, Daphne, Zenfis, Toka, and Church, and calls for their attention. She declares that, for the time being, she will spend the next several days focused on creating high-grade potions. She then asks what the others will do in the meantime, giving them permission to do as they please. With a single voice, they respond with a crisp, yes. Toka speaks first, her voice filled with passion as she proclaims her desire to become strong enough to protect everyone. Zenfis quickly agrees, adding that she also wants the power to protect Sei and the others, and asks if there are any magic tomes she can use for training. Sei confirms that there are plenty. Daphne then cheerfully announces her own plan. She will take care of Chichon, her new nickname for church, and will also prepare everyone's meals. Hearing their intentions, Sei presents a solution for the three girls. She reveals several pairs of ornate, magical earrings, telling them to put them on. Zenfis, clasping her hands in curiosity, asks what the items are. Sei explains that they are 5 senses sharing earrings, which will allow her to supervise their training. The girls are astonished. Zenfis asks why they would need such a thing. Sei clarifies that when worn, the earrings will link their 5 senses directly to hers. She elaborates on the master plan. While she is occupied with making potions, she can use the link to simultaneously oversee Toka's combat practice and Zenfis' magical studies. She then declared her next ambitious task, to give Daphne a tour of the mansion while simultaneously managing her other duties. Her companions, Toka, Daphne, and Zenfis, looked on, flustered and bewildered by the proposition. Sensing the confusion, she turned to Church and asked if she had said something strange. The magical doll simply replied in the affirmative. Church elaborated, explaining that everyone was bewildered because Sei was attempting to do 4 things at once. Toka, trying to grasp the concept, wondered aloud if Sei couldn't just make potions while eating and reading a book, a suggestion that left Sei momentarily speechless. The thought crossed Zenfis' mind that attempting so many things at once often resulted in all of them being left half-finished. Sei protested to Church, insisting that her past failures at multitasking were from her childhood. She declared with confidence that as an adult, she was now perfectly capable of handling parallel tasks, though Church's expression remained impassive. Her confidence, however, won over the others. Daphne exclaimed how amazing her big sis was, while Toka proudly declared it was just what she'd expect from their master. Zenfis quietly concluded that Sei's intellect was simply on a different level from that of ordinary people. As the praise mounted, Sei became slightly flustered, wondering aloud if what she was doing was truly that amazing. Church, in contrast, remained silent and still. Internally, however, the magical doll observed Sei's newfound confidence and growth. A faint, relieved smile graced her lips, pleased to see how far her master had come. As Sei finishes her work, the intricate magical structure of her alchemy workshop begins to dissolve and fade away around her. The workshop vanishes completely, revealing that she is now seated at a small table laden with tea and pastries. Exhausted, she looks up in surprise. Church explains that she had been observing Sei's intense focus on creating high-grade potions and anticipated that her concentration would soon wane. Thinking of Sei's well-being, she prepared the refreshments. Sei is taken aback, realizing Church was actively looking out for her. She continues, asking if Sei is surprised that a robot maid would prepare such a thing for her. Sei confirms that she is, especially since they used to live together. Church simply replies with a polite yes. A warm smile spreads across Sei's face. She realizes this isn't just Church acting on learned habits. Touched, she expresses her gratitude and invites Church to join her. As they sit together, Church states that she does not require nutritional intake by mouth. She simply instructs Sei to sit and enjoy her break. Church watches intently as Sei takes a bite of pastry, then asks how it is. Savoring the flavor, Sei closes her eyes and reflects internally that Church is surprisingly human-like. Her expression becomes more serious. She acknowledges Church's capabilities, but voices a growing concern, wondering aloud what will become of her. Church stands alone, her face impassive. Sei's thoughts echo, pondering how this doll, who seems to possess something like a heart, was left abandoned for 500 years. She worries, when their journey is over, will Church be left alone once more? Sei sits with Church, lost in thought. She reflects on the strange feeling of becoming so invested in what is by all accounts just a doll. For a moment, she chides herself, thinking she's unfit to be a researcher for letting her emotions run so deep. Church sits opposite her, waiting patiently. She shakes off the melancholy, rising with a bright smile. After thanking Church for the tea and cookies, she announces cheerfully that it's time to get back to work. 10 days later, the entire group stands assembled at the top of a grand staircase. Sei, flanked by Church, Daphne, Zenfis, and Toka, declares that their preparations are finally complete and congratulates everyone on their hard work. Behind her, however, Toka and Zenfis look completely drained. Toka mutters that the training was brutally difficult, a sentiment Zenfis silently shares. Noticing their state, Daphne asks Sei what kind of training they were subjected to. Sei explains that she had Toka spar against Church to gain combat experience. The regimen involved fighting until she was defeated, then drinking a recovery potion to induce super regeneration of her muscle fibers. This method, it was noted, was an effective way to build one's physical strength. Toka concedes to Zenfis that she has certainly become tougher, but Zenfis timidly adds that she found their master's methods to be quite Spartan. Sei overhears this and scoffs, declaring that her own master was far more severe. She recounts being left alone in a monster-infested forest for survival training, an ordeal where she nearly died many times. In comparison, she insists their training was gentle. Toka is left speechless. Turning to Zenfis, Sei explains that her training was designed to increase her magic capacity. The process was simple. Cast spells until her magic was completely gone, and then drink a magic potion to instantly replenish it. She cheerfully notes that this is a great way to increase one's magic reserves, though she herself used to train until she collapsed. Zenfis, however, can only clutch her stomach, groaning that she drank too much. Sei simply confirms that was the point. As Zenfis began to tentatively voice a concern, Sei cut her off with a flourish and a confident grin. She declared that, unlike her master, she was no monster and would not subject them to any suddenly life-threatening training. Her companion's question was direct. What would happen if one of them were to die during their journey? As they descended the stairs, Sei casually reassured them that it was fine. She would simply give them a recovery potion and revive them immediately. She leaned in, a sly look in her eyes, and revealed her secret, the 3-second rule. She explained that as long as a recovery potion is administered within 3 seconds of death, a person can be revived without any risk. In fact, she added with a triumphant expression, even if more than 3 seconds passed, up to half a day, they could still be brought back to life with a high-grade resurrection potion. Her grand declaration was met with dead silence. Sei, covering her mouth, wondered if her joke had fallen flat. Deciding it was best to move on, she simply chose to ignore the awkwardness. As Sei tried to brush off the moment, the elf companion quietly addressed Zenfis. She surmised that Sei must have endured great hardship, judging by her manner of speaking. The others listened intently, their expressions somber. Toka then spoke up, her voice filled with admiration. She declared that it was precisely because Sei was so kind to them, despite her own past, that they must strive even harder to be useful to her. The others voiced their enthusiastic agreement. With their spirits lifted and their supplies of high-grade potions fully replenished, Sei announced that it was time. Standing together in the courtyard, they were ready to depart. But as the main group prepared to leave, Sei turned her attention to the two who were staying behind. She looked at the elf companion, who stood silently beside the Stoic church, and asked what she intended to do. The elf companion remained silent, standing beside church in a now empty training ground. The question of her future lingered unanswered. As the elf companion and Sei's other followers watched her depart, Daphne called out with a worried expression, addressing her as Big Sis. Sei paused, turning back with a knowing smile. She held up a single finger and spoke a name, Church. Her expression hardened as she issued a command for Church to follow her. However, Church's hand clenched as she explained that it was impossible. An order from her creator was inscribed upon her, binding her to guard that very spot. In response to this seemingly unbreakable rule, Sei's demeanor shifted instantly. With a confident wink, she announced that it was time for Plan B. The sudden declaration startled Daphne, Toka, and Zenfis. Their surprise grew as the sound of footsteps heralded the arrival of a new figure. Before them stood not one, but two identical maids. The girls cried out in unison, shocked to see another Church. Sei proudly presented the newcomer as Church Mark II, revealing that she had built this second body in her spare time. Her companions were left in awe, amazed that Sei could create such an intricate magical doll so casually. She then explained her solution to the original Church. The binding formula was inscribed on her current body and could only be rewritten by its creator. However, by preparing a new body and linking Church's consciousness to it, she could accompany them while her original form remained to guard the location. The original Church stood perfectly still, silently processing this monumental proposition. Sensing her hesitation, Sei posed a poignant question, asking if she truly wanted to spend another 500 years all alone. With a gentle smile, she urged her to follow. She continues her explanation to Church and the elf companion, clarifying that while her own body has a storage function, it's passive and still requires a manager. She then asks rhetorically if the Mark II body has this feature, answering her own question with a sly confirmation. After all, she doesn't want to struggle just to retrieve what she needs. With the matter settled in her mind, she smoothly extends her open hand in a gesture of offering. Her smile is wide and brilliant as she asks for agreement, her expression radiating pure confidence. In response, Church can only stare, her expression shifting from surprise to deep contemplation as she processes the offer. Taking the doll's silence as consent, Sei immediately begins, announcing she will quickly link them and deploy the ritual formula as magical sigils materialize between her hands. The transfer is instantaneous. A tiny, triumphant Sei declares that she has successfully stolen Church from her original master. The doll, however, flatly denies this playful accusation. As Sei enthusiastically rallies the group to set off once more, Church remains still, looking down at her new shoes. A question forms in her mind. Why does she possess a function that she shouldn't have? Her thoughts are interrupted when Daphne runs up, calling out to Miss Maid. As the young girl approaches, Church clutches her chest, startled by the unfamiliar sensation of a powerful, rhythmic pounding within. Daphne beams, her face alight with joy. She exclaims how happy she is to be able to travel with her favorite big sister. The pure, heartfelt words leave Church stunned and speechless. Taking the maid's hand, Daphne declares her affection and expresses her wish for them to get along well, pulling the still processing Church along with her as they walk. Her innocent affection manifests in a curious way as she begins to gently nibble on Church's finger. The maid doll is taken aback by the unexpected sensation, a quiet "Ami," escaping her thoughts as the small girl continues to mouth her fingertip. A new thought surfaces in her mind. The experience is embarrassing. This embarrassment stems from a deeper realization, the shame of having one's affection discovered by the very person they admire. Her internal monologue is interrupted as Sei, Zenfis, and Toka look on. Sei, with a hint of amusement, asks what the two of them are playing at. Church remains silent, her mind flashing back to a pivotal day. She recalls the long, lonely centuries after her creator, Nicholas Flamel, disappeared. For hundreds of years, she stood as the sole guardian of the estate, bound by her final orders. During that solitary vigil, tears would sometimes stream from her eyes, which she had always dismissed as a simple malfunction. It was only when a young girl, Daphne, pointed it out that she began to understand. She now knows the truth. It was never a malfunction. She was genuinely, deeply happy to be invited on a journey, a joy that stemmed from the realization that she possessed something akin to a human heart. As the memory fades, Sei approaches her, asking if anything is the matter. Church replies that it is nothing. Sei, sensing there is more, gently presses for an answer. The maid looks up, a faint blush on her cheeks, and a small smile forming. She clarifies, explaining that she had simply called out to her. Then, in a surprising gesture, she reaches out and gently pats Sei on the head. The alchemist is left momentarily stunned and speechless by the unexpected display of affection. She remarks that Church laughs as well, to which the maid replies that it depends on the person. Sei finds the response amusingly vague as they stand before a grand, ornate tower. Sometime later, their journey is underway, the wheels of their wagon turning along a dirt road. Church has officially joined their traveling party. As they travel, Sei smiles to herself, pleased that with Church now acting as a luggage carrier, the burden on everyone else has been lightened. She then calls out to her own master. In response, Church turns with a severe expression, addressing Sei with the formal title, Master Sei Fault-sama. The sudden change in address leaves Sei utterly shocked. As the others look on, she continues her explanation, stating that since this body was created by Sei Fault, Sei is her master. A bewildered Sei can only point to herself, questioning if Church truly means her. She elaborates that since Sei is her current master, she will henceforth be addressed as Sei-sama, and that her previous use of master was just a general term. Flustered, Sei tells her to do whatever she wants, prompting a confused, "What is it?" from a maid. Their exchange is cut short as a large, dark-furred beast suddenly lunges towards them. Church instantly identifies the threat, shouting, "Enemy," as a startled Sei looks on in alarm. A pack of vicious, black wolf-like creatures surges across the plains, their paws kicking up dust as they run with unified purpose. From their transport, the group spots the approaching menace. Zenfis is the first to identify them, exclaiming that they are black dogs, while Sei looks on, wondering what they are. As the pack closes in, Sei quietly considers their next move. Zenfis, however, provides crucial intelligence, identifying the creatures as platterhounds. She explains that they hunt in packs, and their fangs are laced with poison. Sei is audibly impressed by Zenfis' knowledge. At this, Toka steps forward confidently, declaring that her time to act has come. She gives an order, telling Church to focus on protecting everyone else. Her order is met with an unexpected complication. As the hounds swarm their wagon, Church calmly reports that she has refused the request. She explains to a bewildered Toka that only her master, Sei, possesses the authority to command her. Sei can only react with a dismayed gasp. Sei, her face etched with worry, calls out Toka's name. Toka turns back to the group with a reassuring look. She clarifies her plan. She will defeat the Platterhounds, while Church will protect them. Stepping in, Zenfis gives a firm, clear command. "Yes, my lord." Toka's face breaks into a wide, sharp-toothed grin as she accepts the order, replying, "Understood." With her new orders, she leaps from the safety of the wagon, launching herself directly at the approaching pack. Toka unleashes her power, shouting the name of her attack, Blast Spear. A series of powerful explosions erupts among the Platterhounds, sending bodies flying. Her attack is a resounding success. From the relative safety of the wagon, Zenfis cheers enthusiastically, exclaiming how amazing Toka is and that she dealt with the threat in a single, powerful strike. Beside her, Daphne watches the aftermath and asks if the weapon Toka used is a magical tool. Zenfis considers the question, replying that it's something a little different. The explanation comes from Sei, who reveals with a proud smile that she created the weapon. She clarifies that it doesn't require any magic. Instead, the spear's tip is coated in a special explosive powder of her own invention. The weapon's mechanism is brutally effective. When Toka thrusts the spear beyond a certain speed, the friction from a movement ignites the powder, triggering a powerful explosion that blasts the hounds away on impact. Back in a wagon, Zenfis is deeply impressed, praising Sei for creating such a novel magical tool. Church soberly adds that for Toka to take on a whole pack of monsters by herself is a testament to Sei's training, which causes Sei to wave her hands in modest denial. Zenfis, however, smiles with confidence, explaining that from the beginning, Toka always possessed such incredible potential. The spear tip, now spent of its explosive charge, gleams cleanly in the light. Sei admits that she only offered some advice, as Toka continues to fight. Church simply watches in silence. Her earlier confidence fades into frustration. Sei realizes that the pack of black hounds is relentless. They refuse to give up the chase. As the hounds press their attack, Daphne's long ears suddenly twitch with intense focus. She asks if they need her to identify the enemy's boss, then confidently confirms that she can. The hunt is far from over. She stands amidst the snarling hounds, her eyes squeezed shut in concentration. Her long rabbit ears twitch, sifting through the noise. A moment later, her eyes snap open with certainty. "I found it," she declares. Her gaze locks onto a single hound as she identifies it as the one giving orders to the others. Sei's voice explains that the four-leaf clover-shaped earrings Daphne is wearing are a magical tool she developed. She continues, clarifying that because Daphne's hearing is so exceptionally sensitive, the magical device's primary purpose is to help her adjust and filter sounds for everyday comfort. However, the tool has a secondary function. By infusing it with magical power, the wearer can precisely isolate and listen to a specific sound, even amidst a cacophony of noise. With the target identified, Sei turns to Zenfis. The young girl responds with a firm and ready yes. Sei smiles, entrusting the final blow to her. "All right, Zenfis, I'm counting on you for the finale." Zenfis's eyes narrow with intense focus. She raises a hand, and without uttering a single word, unleashes her magic with a command, "Wind Blade." A vortex of slicing wind erupts from her hand and engulfs the hound leader. Watching the display, Sei gasps in awe. Turning to Church, Sei remarks on how impressive Zenfis's nonverbal magic is. Church calmly informs her that chanting spells is the norm in this world, making Zenfis's ability quite unusual. Sei, still learning, simply processes this new information. She watched as her companions celebrated their victory. Toka exclaimed with delight that they had all grown stronger. Daphne and Zenfis eagerly agreed, attributing their newfound power entirely to their big sis Sei. The three girls, Toka, Zenfis, and Daphne, beamed with genuine smiles, chorusing their thanks to the young alchemist. Their praise left Sei flustered, her cheeks warming as she stood beside the ever-composed Church. As she flushed with embarrassment, the ground beneath them began to crack. Sei tried to deflect the compliments, insisting they always had that strength within them, and that she had only given them a small push. She credited them for doing all the hard work. Her words were cut short as a monstrous, segmented worm with a circular, fanged maw erupted from the fractured earth. Toka could only stare and remark on the size of the earthworm. The sudden appearance of the sandworm sent Sei into a panic. She admitted she had no confidence against such a colossal beast and turned to her maid, ordering Church to use an advanced explosive potion. Church simply responded, yes, and produced a large, ornate bottle from within her dress. She immediately complied, her arm cocked back as Sei yelled the command to throw it. With a powerful heave, Church hurled the potion directly at the approaching monster. The potion found its mark, resulting in a massive explosion that obliterated the worm. The group was stunned. Toka praised her master's skill, while Zenfis and Daphne marveled at the sheer power of Sei's potion. A flustered Sei tried to insist that they were amazing too. Amidst the awe, Church spoke with a deadpan expression. She stated that she had taken all the delicious parts, adding that, given Sei's tone, her words could easily be mistaken for sarcasm. Standing together in the vast wasteland, the group gazes in awe at a colossal, petrified tree stump, a remnant of some ancient power. Sei lets out a quiet sound of wonder. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the same arid landscape, another party takes a moment to catch their breath. This group includes Boris and an exuberant Phyllite. Having followed Sei's party into the wilderness, Phyllite is overcome with excitement, declaring that this magnificent road should be named the Saint's Highway. Boris, weary from the chase, can only offer a tired agreement. Her admiration for the saint has clearly intensified into something approaching blind faith. The reason for this devotion is the path itself. This dangerous wasteland, once known as an inhuman demon realm, has been rendered safe by the saint's monster-repellent potions, allowing a growing caravan of people to traverse it. Observing this growing procession, Sei wears a satisfied smile, noting to herself that Phyllite seems to be on a pilgrimage. Another traveler points out the scene to Boris, exclaiming how incredible it is. He remarks that Phyllite has become a complete believer. The moment of peace is shattered by a sudden shout. A pack of monstrous wolves is charging towards them. Boris and Phyllite turn in alarm. He instantly realizes the gravity of the situation, wondering if even the saint's potions were not enough to hold back monsters of this class. As Phyllite cries out his name in terror, Boris draws his sword, its steel blade glinting as he prepares to defend the caravan. As the swordsman and his companions brace for the attack, Phylite's eyes widened with a dreadful realization. If they did nothing, everyone in the caravan would become food for the monsters swarming around them. Her fear hardened into resolve. With her sword held ready, she declared that they, the adventurers, had to be the ones to fight. Her declaration brought a grin to Boris's face. He let out a sharp exclamation of agreement, drawing his own blade as they stood ready for the coming battle. Together, they charged headfirst into the snarling pack of wolf-like beasts. But as they closed the distance, a strange thing happened. The monsters actively avoided them, parting to let them pass. Boris voiced his confusion, wondering if it was the saint's monster-repelling power, but quickly decided it felt different from that. He turned to Phyllite, his brow furrowed as he asked why the creatures were behaving this way. She could only look back, equally perplexed. Their confusion was cut short as the ground began to shake violently. From the earth behind the wolves, a colossal, segmented worm-like monster erupted, towering over the landscape. The giant creature lashed out, slamming its immense body down upon the pack of wolves with devastating force. The impact sent a shockwave through the area, and Boris cried out in surprise and pain, demanding to know what was happening. Amidst the chaos, a different sight came into focus, a small, glowing vial held carefully in a hand. The vial was now in Boris's hand. A smile of comprehension spread across his face as he looked at it, then at Phyllite. He realized it belonged to the young Miss Say, and marveled at how incredible she was. Phyllite stared at the small bottle, her expression one of pure astonishment. He watched as Phyllite stood motionless, her eyes wide and fixed on the spot where the monsters had been annihilated. Rushing to her side, he anxiously asked what was wrong and if she was injured. Phyllite simply replied, "No, that's not it." Her expression then transformed into one of pure, tearful joy. She explained to the bewildered Boris that she was shedding tears of gratitude for the saintess's miraculous work. He began to sweat as a realization dawned on him. The other travelers were already celebrating, believing that this new saintess highway possessed a divine power to protect them from monsters. He muttered to himself that this wasn't quite right. A single thought began to echo through the caravan. They had to spread the word to everyone. The crowd erupted into a unified cheer, vowing to spread the tale of this divine road that the saintess had created for their safety. He felt things were spiraling into something immense and uncontrollable. As he fretted, Phyllite playfully called out his name, drawing his attention. With a wide smile, Phyllite noted that he kept calling their savior Missy, reminding him that she was, in fact, the saintess. A flustered Boris could only agree, realizing with dread that a new legend of the saintess was just beginning. From her position, the maid church reports that she has spotted a village ahead. She asks Say if they should stop. Say considers this, glancing sideways at her companions, while a large, wolf-like familiar pants beside them. With their covered wagon rolling across the plains, Say makes a decision. They will ask to stay the night in the village. However, upon arrival, they are greeted by a scene of utter devastation. The village is in ruins, its buildings smashed and debris scattered everywhere. Say, followed by Daphne, Xenphis, Toka, and Church, looks on in horror. She murmurs that the damage is terrible, wondering aloud if a monster attack was the cause. Her shock quickly hardens into resolve. She declares forcefully that this is hardly a situation where they can simply ask for lodging. Taking command of the situation, Church issues orders. She tells Toka to go and find the village chief. Daphne and Church herself, she explains, will assist Say directly. With a bright, resounding cry of affirmation, Toka and Xenphis accept their roles without hesitation. The girls gather around Say, their admiration clear. They praise her kindness for wanting to help the injured people, telling her to leave the other matters to them and focus on healing. Toka adds that their master is truly a person of deep compassion. Inwardly, however, Say's hand clenches into a tight fist. Her true feeling on the matter is simple. She hates this. Her composure breaks as she blurts out her real motivation with a frustrated expression. She hates camping out. She just wants to sleep somewhere with a roof over her head. After her outburst, Say approaches one of the survivors. It is the swordsman, Boris, who sits huddled and shivering against a ruined wall. Approaching the injured swordsman, Say offers a polite greeting. She introduces herself and her companion as simple travelers and asks if he would allow them to treat his wounds. He looks up at them with a cynical expression. Hearing her offer of treatment, he scoffs, asking with clear disdain if they are members of the tended church. Say's pleasant demeanor immediately sours. Her voice sharpens as she refutes his assumption. She declares that they have nothing to do with the tended church and are simply outsiders, wondering what on earth he is talking about. Deciding to take matters into her own hands, Say produces a potion and calls out to her maid, Church. The command is implicit. Before he can react, Church seizes Boris. He yells in protest, demanding to know what they are doing and shouting for them to stop. In response to his struggles, Church delivers a powerful, non-lethal electric shock, instantly incapacitating the swordsman. As Boris lies twitching on the ground, Say turns to her maid, admonishing her for using an electric current. Church simply replies that she was following her master's order to provide treatment. With the patient subdued, Church uncorks the potion and begins to pour the healing liquid over his wounds. A moment later, Boris sits up, flexing his hand in astonishment. He stares at his arm, completely healed, and murmurs in disbelief. Say gives a cheerful thumbs up, praising Daphne for bringing another injured person who can now be moved. Boris, sitting on the ground, confirms that he feels no pain anywhere, his previous hostility replaced by shock and relief. He watches as Say, having finished with him, turns her attention to the other injured villagers. A crowd has gathered, and she directs them to form a line, promising to heal every one of them. As the villagers begin to organize, the village chief observes from the side, his body trembling. He reflects on the direness of their situation, realizing they had been on the verge of complete annihilation. Under the light of the full moon, the group of villagers stands together. Boris, now fully recovered, addresses the despairing chief, declaring that there are no injured people left among them. The chief looks on in confusion. Say, flanked by Church and Daphne, expresses her gratitude before turning to the old man. "So, you're the village chief?" she asks. The village chief can only stare, muttering that what he has witnessed is a miracle, especially since she only seemed to splash some potions around. His awe is interrupted as Toka rushes to Say's side with an urgent report. Monsters had attacked hours earlier, leaving numerous casualties and a significant number of dead. The grim report hangs in the air as they survey the damaged village buildings under the moonlight. The chief grimly acknowledges the state of his village, asking if there are indeed fatalities. In response to his somber question, Say gives the chief a reassuring pat. With renewed determination, she announces, "All right, let's go." Her expression turns serious as she asks the critical question, "Where are the bodies?" The scene shifts to a heartbreaking sight. A small boy weeping over two figures covered by sheets, his cries for his mother and father echoing in the quiet street. Taking in the tragic scene, Say's resolve hardens. She calls out a single name, Church. Her maid immediately steps forward, acknowledging the command with a simple yes. She uncorked a vial of resurrection potion, its contents shimmering with an otherworldly light as she prepared to pour it over the deceased. As the liquid cascaded over them, bubbles began to rise. A man, a woman, and a young boy, once lifeless, started to stir as vitality returned to their bodies. The family sat up, utterly bewildered. The young boy cried out for his mother and father, while the man stared at his own hands, asking in disbelief if they were truly alive. Their tearful, joyous reunion was witnessed by Say and her companions, who watched as the resurrected family embraced. The village chief, overcome with emotion, dropped to his knees, proclaiming it a divine miracle. He declared that Say must be a goddess incarnate, sent from the heavens to save them. Say, however, looked on with growing unease, realizing the situation had taken an unexpected turn. The resurrected family also began to thank her profusely, calling her Lady Saint. Flustered by the worship, Say tried to correct them, insisting that she was just an ordinary alchemist. Her maid, Church, then spoke up with a calm assessment. She stated that while it might not be the power of a god, denying the miraculous nature of the event would be quite difficult. That was all. She continued, walking forward as she commented that Say had certainly noticed a good point to exploit, implying she had not been conservative with the use of the resurrection potion. Seizing the chance to clarify, Say explained the mechanics. A superior potion, also known as a magic potion, does not activate unless the creator channels their own magic into it. She reminded Church it was just like the explosion potion she had asked her to throw earlier. Her companion processed this information. Church concluded that the mechanism was indeed quite similar to magic. Her companion listened intently as Say continued her explanation. The alchemist clarified that magic is typically activated by channeling it into a formula, and in this case, the potion itself serves as that formula. She admitted that this method was somewhat inconvenient, but confirmed that both the resurrection and this new potion were of a superior grade. She then declared her intention to modify them so that anyone could use them, regardless of their own magical ability. With a soft click of her heels on the ground, Say took a step forward, stating her plan to add another component to her work. Her movement drew Church's attention to the ruined building nearby. The maid asked what Say intended to do there, to which Say replied that it would be inconvenient to be without a house. A confident smile spread across Say's face as she addressed Church directly, announcing that she would fix the building. Her loyal companion simply affirmed the command. In her hand, a new, intricately shaped bottle appeared, shimmering with a brilliant light as its power activated. Holding the glowing potion, Say told her astonished companions to watch. She declared that the house would be restored, as if time itself was rewinding. Before their eyes, the scattered debris and broken walls flew back into place, reassembling the structure until it stood perfectly whole once more, returned to its original state. The onlookers were stunned. Boris and Toka proclaimed it an amazing miracle, a divine act performed by the saintess. As they shouted in awe, Say flushed with embarrassment, while Church quietly identified the phenomenon as ancient magic. Say quickly corrected her, explaining that it was not ancient magic, but a regression potion. This prompted Church to ask if it was a form of restoration magic. After her technical discussion, Sei turns her attention to a puzzled Zenfis. Reverse, the girl murmurs, trying to comprehend. Sei simply smiles and confirms, that's right. She elaborates on the potion's nature, explaining that it is a concoction that distorts space-time to return an object to its state before it was broken. As the explanation concludes, Sei notices Zenfis's bewildered expression and asks what is wrong. Church calmly interjects, pointing out that Sei had given a highly specialized explanation to Zenfis, who is non-alchemist. In a sudden burst of frustration, Zenfis grabs Sei by the shoulders, insisting that she could have just said it was a potion that restores things. A startled Sei can only manage a meek yes. Her point made, Zenfis's expression shifts to one of bright determination. She declares that they should set aside the difficult details for later and focus on what they can do right now. A brief, thoughtful silence follows as Zenfis appears to steel her resolve. Under the light of the twin moons, her decision is made, affirmed with a quiet but firm yes. Rejoining the group, Toka asks what they're planning to do. Zenfis announces that she will begin preparations for a soup kitchen, to which Toka enthusiastically agrees. Inspired by this, Sei smiles with renewed purpose. All right, she exclaims, I'll do what I can to. Church, ever the pragmatist, questions if there is any meaning to this activity. Sei confirms that there is. It will be a test run for the potion she created. This prompts Zenfis to ask a critical question. Is their supply of potions limited? Sei dismisses the idea of hoarding her creations, explaining with a confident smile that if they aren't used, they will simply go to waste. She continues, pointing out that using them allows her to collect valuable data, so it is far better to use them liberally when the opportunity arises. Her face beams with a wide, cheerful smile as she declares it a win-win situation that will make everyone happy. As Sei finishes her explanation, Zenfis looks on with a slight, knowing smile, while Church remains silent and observant beside her. Later, at the soup kitchen, the head chief stands in stunned silence, his eyes wide with amazement at the scene. He can only utter a single word. Incredible. The chief's awe is directed at the bustling town square, where Sei and her companions stand. Zenfis remarks that it feels like they're watching a dream, but Sei, with a proud smile, corrects her, stating that this is reality. From a distance, Church wonders if Sei is just being smug and willful, while Sei pretends not to hear. All around them, the townspeople enjoy the meal, calling out their thanks to the Lady Saint. One man exclaims how delicious the soup is, declaring he has never had anything like it before. The secret to the soup's flavor is soon revealed. Daphne explains to a curious Zenfis that it was supposed to be just a simple soup. However, she adds, the taste changed after she added a special seasoning given to them by their master. Sei, holding up the bottle of dark liquid. A young woman, captivated by the taste, approaches Sei directly. She exclaims how wonderfully delicious the soup is and eagerly asks for the name of the seasoning. In response, Sei casually explains that it's a seasoning-like potion she made on a whim to make anything taste delicious. Nearby, Boris overhears this, and his face contorts in disbelief as he processes the casual creation of such a powerful item. The maid, Church, covers her mouth with a hand, quietly remarking on the terrible naming sense. Flustered by the comment, Sei whirls around and shouts for her to be quiet. The source of her embarrassment is the excited chatter from the rest of the group. One person marvels that it's an amazing seasoning, while another wonders what to call the condiment Lady Sei created. A suggestion is floated, Sei oil. The idea catches on instantly, with the group enthusiastically agreeing that Sei oil is the perfect name. The village chief, his face etched with desperation, clasps his hands and pleads with Sei. He implores her, the Lady Saint, to use her power to re-establish the protective barrier around their village. Sei seems taken aback by the request for a barrier. The chief explains that the one they had was erected by an ancient hero, a fact that gives her pause. For a long time, the peace of the village had been maintained by that very barrier. However, the chief continues, after many long years, it began to weaken. It eventually broke completely, leading to a recent tragedy. The chief looks on helplessly as Sei considers the situation, thinking to herself that creating such a barrier is likely impossible for her, as she is not a true saint. Her contemplation ends as a look of confidence washes over her face. With a wink and a thumbs up, she declares that while she can't make a barrier, she can certainly ensure that monsters stay away. She then produces a small, ornate bottle filled with a sparkling, crystalline liquid. Turning to her companions, Sei explains that it is a monster-repellent potion. She hands it over, asking Toka and Zenfis to take it and make a full circle around the village. As they depart, she reassures the stunned village chief about the potion's efficacy. She states with a smile that it should remain effective for about 500 years, a claim that causes the chief to cry out in utter disbelief. Later, Daphne expresses her awe, and Sei explains that even if rain washes the potion away, its components will remain in the soil, sustaining the repellent effect. Daphne is impressed, but then voices her concern, asking if it will work against the sandworm. The mention of the creature startles Sei. Her expression hardens as she turns to her automaton maid, Church, and orders her to prepare to harvest materials from it. At that very moment, the immense, tooth-filled maw of a sandworm erupts from the ground before them. She stands before the smoldering remains of the sandworm, which the villagers now recognize. They exclaim in awe that the saintess herself has defeated it. Sei, however, simply thinks to herself that she only destroyed it because it was in the way. As she announces her departure, the village chief rushes towards her group, calling out for her to wait. He explains that he has something for the saintess. Her expression hardens. She delivers a stern warning, telling him not to assume that a saintess will always be there to help. She then continues, her tone shifting as she advises that instead of waiting for divine intervention, they must protect what is precious to them with their own will and power. The chief is left stunned and speechless. Walking away with her companions, she mutters with some annoyance that being relied upon indefinitely is a nuisance. Daphne looks on with concern. Xenphis, trailing behind the group, meekly agrees with Sei's sentiment, her shoulders slumped as she appears lost in thought. Later, inside their carriage, Daphne notices Xenphis's quiet mood. She asks if she's feeling down because they are now far from the Elven lands. When Xenphis confirms, Daphne adds that it would be wonderful if she could reunite with her family. A shadow of doubt crosses her face as she considers the low probability of such a reunion ever happening. Seeing her friend's distress, Daphne gently pokes her cheek, chiding her for her pessimism before they've even begun to search. Sei then leans in with a reassuring wink, cheerfully advising that life is often about improvisation. She tells Xenphis they will figure things out when the time comes. She responds to her companion's encouragement with a bright, grateful smile. With a small, determined fist, Sei agrees, thanking them for lifting her spirits and affirming that it's only natural to support a friend who is feeling down. The good mood is infectious. Church, the magical doll maid, also beams, thinking to herself that after such a long journey, a refreshing bath would be wonderful. Her master, the elf creator, overhears this and explains that she has already used purification potions on everyone, so their bodies are technically clean. However, she concedes that she understands it's a matter of feeling, as physical cleanliness doesn't always equate to feeling refreshed. Below them, Sei, Toka, and Daphne are already splashing happily in the water, and Church declares her desire to join the cute girls for a bath. In the water, Xenphis and Daphne are playing together, splashing each other with wide, carefree smiles. The moment is one of pure joy and friendship. The playful moment is suddenly interrupted. Daphne's long rabbit ears twitch, catching a sound. She excitedly gets Sei's attention, exclaiming that she hears water and that she's found something. Her excitement is met with a sudden, sharp realization from Church. The maid's eye narrows with alarm as she instantly comprehends the true nature of the sound Daphne heard. Following this alarming realization, the group stands on a grassy bank overlooking not a clear stream, but a murky, stagnant body of water. With a grim tone, Church identifies it, a poisoned swamp. Their discovery grows more horrifying as they spot a figure at the swamp's edge. A young girl is collapsed on the ground, an empty bucket lying beside her. Sei's face drains of color. She points, her voice filled with shock as she connects the dots. She asks in horror if the girl was actually planning to drink from the poisoned swamp, realizing how close a call it was. As Sei grapples with the scene, Church confirms her suspicions. She states that there wasn't supposed to be a swamp in this area at all, and questions if this means another detour. Sei, however, looks on with deep concern, knowing they cannot simply leave. She beamed, declaring that since they were on a journey, such detours were part of the charm. As she spoke, the girl who had been unconscious began to stir, letting out a faint groan. Her eyes snapped open. She sat up abruptly, astonished that her body felt light and she could breathe without difficulty. What's going on? She wondered aloud, just as Sei offered a cheerful, good morning. The girl stared, still dazed. With a confident smile, Sei asked if she was awake, then introduced herself. I'm Sei, and you are? Now standing with the rest of the group, the girl introduced herself as Lala and declared them all her companions. She then looked back at Sei, expressing how amazing the whole situation was. Lala clasped her hands, her eyes shining with admiration. She exclaimed that by dispelling the miasma, Sei seemed just like a saint. Hearing the word miasma, Sei looked pleased but privately noted the girl's misunderstanding. Sei began her inquiry, asking if there was a workshop nearby. She explained that since the new king's rule, royal alchemist guilds have been built across the country. Lala hesitantly confirmed, a workshop, yes. The source was revealed, the workshop of the gourmet of deadly poisons. The name carried a dark history. 500 years prior, a magic tool guild known as the gourmet of deadly poisons existed, notorious for trading suspicious items at high prices. It was a guild with a terrible reputation, and Sei reflected that evil is truly persistent. The surface of the corrupted water was covered in a foul substance, spreading like mold. Putting the pieces together, Sei approached Lala, who was resting against a tree. Hey, she asked directly, is there pollution happening? Lala's simple, affirmative yes confirmed her suspicions. She listens as the elf girl, Lala, explains that a serious form of pollution is occurring across the entire country. When Sei asks what she means by pollution, Lala clarifies that it is a phenomenon triggered by the contamination of the soil. Lala confirms that in this specific instance, the cause is the wastewater being discharged from the workshop. She describes the situation as environmental destruction and a source of sickness. Because the gourmet of deadly poisons has built so many workshops, their effluent has contaminated the soil, which in turn has blighted the mountain's greenery and poisoned the air, ground, and water. The land, she concludes, has become tainted by a foul miasma. Hearing this, Daphne asks Sei what this miasma, or shuki, is. Sei explains that, to be precise, it is a toxic gas invariably produced during the creation of magic tools, specifically when processing the magic crystals that serve as their core. She continues, clarifying that while it is called a gas, the true nature of the miasma is actually fine particles generated during the process. Lala's eyes light up with admiration, exclaiming that Sei is incredible. She reveals that even the country's court mages were unaware of the miasma's true composition. This praise makes Sei flush with embarrassment. She realizes with a jolt that what is considered elementary knowledge from magic tool creation in her world is not common knowledge here, and she wonders why it hasn't been passed down, especially to someone like Lala. Lala then turns to Sei and makes a heartfelt plea, asking her to come to her village because everyone there is suffering. Her words strike a chord. Sei's expression hardens with resolve as she declares that she wants to have a fun journey, and she hates the idea of people suffering right in front of her. Her kindness is met with tears of overwhelming gratitude. Lala, her face beaming, thanks the Lady Saint profusely for agreeing to help. Upon arriving at Lala's village, the scene is grim. The air itself feels heavy and foul. An elderly elf, observing the state of his home, remarks that the situation is truly terrible. As they stand at the village entrance, Church reports her findings to say, the miasma concentration in the atmosphere has reached a level that causes significant harm to the human body. Just then, Lala spots the elderly elf and calls out to him. The elder whirls around, his face contorted with anger and suspicion. He glares at the newcomers, demanding to know what they are doing there. Sei is taken aback by his youthful appearance despite his title, internally remarking that it's impossible to tell an elf's age by their looks. She steps forward with a polite introduction, but the elder cuts her off, furiously ordering them to get out for bringing a human into their midst. Without another word, Sei responds not with words, but by hurling a potion directly at his face. As the potion splashes over the stunned elder, a nearby villager gasps. Sei calmly explains that it was just a low-grade purification potion, used for washing away dirt or breaking curses. She then pointedly asks the elder if his body doesn't feel lighter now. The elder, initially bewildered, touches his own face. A wave of cleansing energy washes over him, and he stares at his hands in utter shock as the effects become apparent. He can't believe it. He questions if she truly just purged the miasma from inside his body. Sei simply smiles, confirming his suspicion, and states that she wants to treat the rest of the villagers as well. With a confident wink, she asks if he will take her to them. The elf elder, now cleansed of miasma, exclaims in shock that his body feels light. His companions are amazed, with Church noting that not even elves can typically use such high-level healing magic. As he trembles with the unfamiliar lightness, Sei calmly addresses him as elder. Overwhelmed, he turns to her, formally acknowledging her as Lady Saint. Observing this, the elf creator questions the elder, wondering aloud why the elves, with their high magical aptitude, couldn't use simple healing magic. The elder looks away, a troubled expression on his face. She then explains the true nature of their affliction. The atmospheric pollution has caused a widespread magical power deficiency among the elves, preventing them from generating their own magic from the ambient mana in the air. For an elf, she concludes grimly, being unable to use magic is as catastrophic as losing one's own limbs. The elder can only bow his head in defeated agreement. In response to his despair, Sei presents him with a swirling potion, telling him to drink it. He obeys, and a moment later, his eyes widen. He exclaims that he can refine magic again. Satisfied, Sei announces that the recovery potion worked and calls for everyone's attention. She holds up another vial, turning to her companions and asking for their help in distributing the potions to the rest of the villagers. Without hesitation, Lala, Toka, and Daphne shout their enthusiastic agreement, ready to help. As her friends prepare, the elder looks on in awe, marveling that the saint could not only purify the miasma, but also cure their supposedly incurable disease. Nearby, the elf creator watches the scene unfold with a knowing, satisfied smile. Her explanation left Sei utterly baffled. What do you mean, an incurable disease? She asked, her expression a mixture of confusion and disbelief. In response, the elf creator clarified the grim reality. She conceded that while magical power deficiency is a difficult disease, it isn't technically incurable. The problem, she explained, is that in the current era, there are no longer any healers with the skill to treat it. Sei could only stammer, "There's no one." As Church watched her master absorb this, the elf creator confirmed that, for all practical purposes, it is now considered an incurable illness. Sei could only murmur in understanding, the pieces falling into place. She then reminded Sei that this world was 500 years removed from the one she knew. The elf creator asked if she had forgotten that various techniques and skills have been lost to time, fading into obscurity. Her expression grew somber as she admitted it was true. Things that were once commonplace 500 years ago are now impossible, and the world is filled with anxieties. But she resolved that there was no use in dwelling on such deep concerns. Sei, however, was not deterred. Holding up a potion, she declared that simply treating the villagers wouldn't be a permanent solution, as their condition would only deteriorate again. A new plan formed in her mind. She instructed Church to take the potion, resolving to help the people right in front of them. Understood, Master, Church replied instantly. She then turned to her other companions. Toka-chan, she called out, can you throw this high-grade potion into the sky with all your might? Toka's eyes lit up with excitement, readily agreeing to the task. Sei then gave a second order. Church, snipe it. Church confirmed her understanding, preparing to execute the plan. In an instant, the sky above the village opened up, unleashing a sudden, torrential downpour. But this was no ordinary rain. Each droplet glowed with a soft, ethereal light, creating luminous ripples as they struck the ground and rooftops. Below, the villagers looked up in stunned silence. One of them shouted for everyone to look. The village's miasma was vanishing. The elf woman could only stare in wonder, whispering, "What is this?" She stared in awe at the cleansing rain falling from the sky. Beside her, Sei smiled and identified the phenomenon simply as a rain potion. Her amazement only grew as Sei elaborated on the process. She had induced a chemical reaction to form rain clouds, which were infused with a purification potion. This would cleanse both the land and the air within a set area. The elf companion whispered that even for elves, weather manipulation was an incredible feat. A sudden realization struck the elf companion. This was not merely advanced alchemy, but a form of lost ancient magic. Meanwhile, the elf creator watched with a smug expression, remarking that she, too, was once that impressive. Church dryly advised her not to get carried away, prompting the creator to shout back at her to be quiet. Ignoring their bickering, the elf companion slammed her fist on a surface, declaring that there was something more important to address. Sei met her intensity with a bright, determined smile, raising a fist of her own as she declared, "Let's solve this problem." Her declaration confused the others. The elf creator questioned if purifying the land wasn't already a solution. Sei clarified that she meant a more fundamental resolution. Her target was not the land, but the source of the corruption itself. The Sorcerer's Guild, specifically the one known as the Gourmet of the Cursed Pot. A fist slammed down in resolve. A dark, determined aura surrounded Sei, her smile turning sharp. "We're going to crush them," she announced. Her declaration was met with a mixture of reactions. The elf companion looked on with nervous sweat. Daphne appeared frightened, and Toka crossed her arms in annoyance, while Church simply smirked, pleased by the turn of events. In the wake of Sei's declaration, a collective cry of utter disbelief echoes over the village rooftops. What? The mission has been declared, to punish evil. On the outskirts of Anemisjiv, a village in the elf country, stands a collection of modest homes against a backdrop of sparse winter trees. Sei and her companions arrive before a grand, yet ominous-looking structure that looms over the landscape, its architecture far more ornate than the surrounding village. Her expression is grim as she confirms their location. This, she announces, is the workshop of the Gourmet of Deadly Poisons, just as the village chief had told them. Her master, the elf creator, reacts with wide-eyed surprise, questioning if this is truly the place. The name, a Buxony's workshop, clearly startles the elf creator, her companion looking on with concern. Sei, however, is filled with righteous indignation. She turns to her master, clenching her fists, and states that while she has many things she wants to say, for now, she will limit it to just one thing. She then shouts with absolute certainty, declaring that even without seeing the owner's face, she knows they are undoubtedly a villain. Moments later, her demeanor has completely changed. Now inside the workshop's reception area, Sei presents a sweet, disarming smile to the man at the desk. She introduces herself and her party as traveling merchants who have come specifically because they wish to purchase the famed magic tools of the Gourmet of Deadly Poisons. As Sei puts on her act, her master's mind races. She is certain this is the source of the village's affliction, piecing together the villagers' testimonies with the geography of the area. Her resolve hardens. She must find proof. The receptionist, however, is not easily swayed. He eyes Sei with suspicion, stating that he has never heard of a merchant named Sei Fault and calls her a suspicious person. Sei's smile doesn't waver. She calmly dismisses his concerns and presents him with a small, wrapped box. When he asks what it is, she explains with a knowing look that it is a gift of golden yellow sweets. His eyes widen in disbelief. Before him, Sei has opened a large bag, revealing it to be filled to the brim with gleaming, perfectly formed gold bars. Her companions look on from behind her, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Utterly stunned by the sight, the receptionist stammers that he will fetch Master Abuxony at once. As he turns, Daphne cries out, questioning the sudden appearance of the gold bullion. In response to her friend's shock, Sei gives a sly wink, casually mentioning that she had made the gold bars just a short while before their arrival. Her nonchalant confession sends her companions into a frenzy. Toka grabs her, horrified, asking if she resorted to theft. Sei frantically denies the accusation, insisting she created them with alchemy. In the background, the receptionist pauses, utterly bewildered by the chaotic exchange. Xinfis, however, calmly begins to explain. She states that the very origin of alchemy was the pursuit of creating gold. Sei affirms this, clarifying that the fundamental principle was to transmute worthless minerals into something of great value. She continues the lesson, revealing that over time, most alchemists abandoned the difficult task of creating gold. Instead, they shifted their focus to developing byproducts of their research, such as potions and magical tools. Her companions listen, awestruck. Even the receptionist, who has been listening in, murmurs to himself that the ability to create gold sounds like something from a fairy tale. Xinfis, however, beams with pure delight. Her eyes sparkle as she exclaims that what Sei has just demonstrated is true alchemy. Sei, in turn, looks slightly embarrassed by the earnest praise. Flustered, Sei brushes off the accomplishment, muttering that it was surprisingly easy and that her own master used to create gold frequently. The receptionist, his demeanor completely changed, now addresses Sei with the reverence due a great merchant. He cautions her that while he understands, it is not recommended to create too much gold, as it would cause the metal's value to plummet. Shortly after, a large, flamboyantly dressed man appears before the group, his arms spread wide in a grand welcome. With a booming voice, he thanks them profusely for taking the trouble to visit such a remote location. His effusive greeting is met with suspicion. Daphne whispers to her companions that his appearance certainly lives up to his ominous title, while Sei and Church stare with unconvinced expressions. Stepping forward, Sei formally introduces herself as ISEKAI'D. She states that she has come seeking the magic tools made by the gourmet of deadly poisons, surmising that the receptionist must have reported the arrival of a woman carrying a lot of gold. Without pausing, she immediately requests to see the production process. The man is momentarily flustered by her directness, but Sei presses on, assuring him that she will pay generously for the tour. At the promise of payment, his hesitation vanishes. Beaming, he bows and gestures enthusiastically for them to follow him, announcing that he will guide them personally. He leads them into a vast, stark workshop. Inside, rows upon rows of identical men are hunched over workbenches, engaged in some form of meticulous labor. A closer view reveals the workers are all wearing visors that cover their eyes. They methodically sniff small vials, their movements mechanical and devoid of any spirit. As Sei observes the grim scene, the man proudly explains that these are his employees. He claims they stay and work here every day, completely of their own volition. Sei's expression darkens as she asks what is going on. Her hand clenches into a tight, trembling fist. A single, sharp realization cuts through her. It's all eyes. She recognizes the look in their eyes all too well. They're the dead eyes of people being crushed by unreasonable demands from their superiors, forced to work endlessly. It is the same look she once wore. Her anger simmering, Sei observes the workshop more closely. She notes that despite being told the workers live on-site, there are not even simple beds for them to rest. This is not a proper lodging. Her gaze then falls upon a poorly made sword. She recognizes the technique as the simplest way to create a magic tool, by attaching a processed magic crystal to an item and imbuing it with power. The result is shoddy. Worse still are the magic crystals themselves. They are jagged and uneven, not processed into spheres, which is the most efficient form. She realizes that with such flawed components, no amount of imbued magic could ever produce a sufficient effect. Her fury erupts. She trembles with rage, questioning what kind of deplorable methods he is forcing on his workers in a place he dares call a workshop. Turning away from the shoddy production line, she calls out sharply, "Toka-chan." Looking towards her companions, she gives a chillingly simple decree. "I will permit it." She extends her hand towards the stunned Abuksini and gives a clear command. "Punch this idiot with all your might." The gourmet of deadly poison stares, his face a mask of disbelief. Toka's response is instantaneous. A wide, predatory grin spreads across her face, revealing her sharp teeth as she eagerly shouts, "Yes." Sei watches on, her expression cold and determined. Sei understands Toka's fury. She and the others had also suffered terribly as slaves and could never forgive such a situation. To ensure the message is delivered with proper force, she calls out, "Church, give a strengthening potion to Toka-chan." In an instant, the potion is produced, and Toka downs it without hesitation, the magical liquid glowing as she consumes it. A moment later, Abuksini's eyes widen in pure terror as a massive, scaled fist, now empowered by the potion, comes hurtling toward his face. He is sent flying through the air by Toka's potion-enhanced uppercut, letting out a pained cry. The dragonkin roars with satisfaction, her fist still raised in a show of power. The force of the blow sends him crashing into the far wall. As the stunned workers look on, Sei issues a new command to her maid, Church, ordering her to use all the gold bars they have to buy out the workers' rights and pay their consolation money. Church immediately complies, tossing a pile of gold onto the floor. She then turns her attention to the bewildered workers, pointing at them with an unwavering, authoritative finger. She commands them to listen carefully. With a confident, almost predatory smile, she makes a bold declaration. As of this moment, she has taken over the workshop, and they are all to follow her instructions. The workers remain frozen in place, utterly stunned by the rapid and violent change in management. Sei begins to outline her first order. Her first command, however, is not what they expect. She tells them all to go to sleep. With Church smiling beside her, Sei assures them that she will prepare a place for them to rest for the night, and that they can talk about everything else later. This unexpected kindness causes the workers to blush, their expressions softening from shock to relieved gratitude. Moments later, the workshop floor is transformed into a makeshift dormitory, with the workers sleeping soundly in neat rows of beds. Nearby, a Bound of Buxony complains to Sei, accusing her of being a common robber, but his protests are ignored. Watching over the sleeping workers, Sei stands with her companions. She reflects on the situation, admitting to them that she simply could not let the injustice she witnessed go unpunished. Her maid, Church, looks at her with a serious expression. She warns Sei that after such a flagrant display, it is only a matter of time before the guild's upper management arrives to investigate. She stood within the newly acquired workshop as her maid. Church inquired about how she intended to respond to the coming authorities. With a confident flick of her finger, Sei declared that the situation was, in fact, quite convenient for her. She turned, a determined glint in her eyes, and announced that she had a few words she'd like to say to the boss. Her ambition was not merely to confront the leadership, but to change the entire guild from its very roots. Church questioned if this meant simply crushing it, but Sei clarified that physical destruction was insufficient. Another magic tool guild, just as prone to causing pollution, could easily take its place. When Church asked for the specifics of her plan, Sei explained that the first step was to fully grasp the workshop's current state. With that established, she declared with sudden intensity that they would create an SOP. The term hung in the air, leaving Daphne, Toka, and Zenfis completely bewildered. They could only echo the strange acronym in unison. SOP. Seeing their blank expressions, Sei explained with exasperation that, judging by the way this workshop manufactured its magic tools, there was no chance it had a proper SOP. She continued to think aloud, muttering that for now, they should create an SOP while also processing magic crystals and shaping the magic tools. Her companions remained lost, their expressions a mixture of confusion and concern. A sudden realization then dawned on her. With renewed vigor, she exclaimed that they would need an acceleration potion and ordered Church to produce one immediately. The sharp, urgent command made Church flinch in surprise. Recovering, she asked Sei what had come over her, questioning the sudden talk of an SOP and its formal name. Church reminded her master that she had previously advised against using specialized jargon that only she could comprehend. She sees the confusion on her companions' faces and quickly tries to reassure them. She explains that they shouldn't worry, as the document is merely a set of instructions that she wrote in a needlessly complicated and difficult-to-understand way. Her attempt at clarification leaves her stammering, realizing that no one understood her at all. Church, however, calmly states that she figured Sei was just trying to sound cool. She continues her analysis, speculating that by being so self-important and trying to push all the work onto others, Sei must have ended up isolated and working all alone. The sharp observation hits too close to home. Sei collapses onto the floor, wailing that Church has it all wrong, and that wasn't her intention at all. Seeing her master's distress, Church kneels beside her. She changes her approach, stating that they will simply have everyone do what they are able to do. Putting this simpler plan into action, Sei turns to Toka and Daphne, asking them to perform a major cleaning of the workshop. She also requests that Church help them. Her attention then shifts to Zenfis, who is tasked with organizing all the necessary paperwork. Finally, as Sei begins to outline Church's role, the entire group, now with clear and simple tasks, responds with a unified and enthusiastic confirmation that they understand. She formally asks Church to be her assistant. The maid accepts with a crisp, "Understood, master." With her team organized, Sei's thoughts turn to the item she truly wanted, an acceleration potion. With her team assembled and motivated, Sei issues a challenge, asking if they can keep up with her accelerated pace. Church responds with a confident "of course," as the group stands ready to improve their new workshop together. Phyllite stirs, sitting up in a makeshift bed. She realizes with some satisfaction that she managed to get about 3 hours of sleep, a rare luxury for her recently. With a soft sigh, she prepares to get up. Her brief moment of peace shatters as she remembers her obligations. There are still magic tools due for delivery today. A jolt of panic runs through her. She has to get back to work immediately. She rushes to her workshop, throwing the door open with a clatter. Her eyes widen in utter shock at the sight that greets her. Inside, lined up perfectly on a rack, is the entire order of swords. Every single one is complete. Stunned, Phyllite turns to find a young woman with long, light hair accompanied by 2 others. The woman greets her, saying she could have slept longer. Confused, Phyllite asks who she is. With a confident smile, the woman introduces herself as Sei, a traveling alchemist. Phyllite reels back, exclaiming in disbelief. She grabs Sei, demanding to know how this was possible. She insists the task was so overwhelming she had already given up on finishing it. Sei calmly states that she was the one who made them. Sei continues, explaining that the swords aren't just finished. Their magic conductivity is on a completely different level. She boasts that she's never seen such a perfect enchantment. Intrigued, Phyllite picks up one of the swords to inspect it. Testing the blade, Phyllite is stunned when it slices through a metal table with impossible ease. She questions how it can be so sharp, noting that the iron-cutting enchantment she ordered should only provide a minor increase in sharpness. Realizing her grave misjudgment, she turns and offers a deep, sincere apology to Sei. Clutching the sword, Phyllite is overcome with emotion. She admits she's never encountered such a wonderful magic tool and expresses deep regret for not realizing she was in the presence of an incredible magic tool master. Sei accepts the praise with a confident smile, feigning modesty by saying it wasn't that much trouble. Beside her, Church quietly addresses her as Master. Her arrival at the Grand Workshop did not go unnoticed. A young elf, flustered by the sudden appearance of Sei and her companions, admitted he had gotten a bit carried away. After asking for their names, he formally introduced himself as Terry. In response to his unspoken assumptions, Sei offered a bright, confident smile. She clarified that she was not a magic tool master, but rather an alchemist. Her declaration left the young elf utterly speechless, his mouth hanging open in disbelief. Ignoring his stunned silence, she turned to face the assembled workers. With a commanding presence, she introduced herself as ISEKAI'D. She then explained her purpose, stating that after observing the workshop's current situation, she had decided to buy it out and was now their new on-site manager. A wave of unease and murmuring swept through the crowd of workers at her sudden announcement. To quell their confusion, she presented an item for their inspection. Acknowledging that her sudden arrival was perplexing, she urged them to examine the sword. The workers gathered around, marveling at the magnificent enchantment and beautiful processing, admitting they had never witnessed such quality. As they admired the blade, one of the workers held up a document, exclaiming that with this standard operating procedure, even they could produce such items. Terry, standing nearby, could only stare in utter astonishment. Sei then turned her attention back to Terry. With Lala and Church at her side, she presented him with a manual, explaining that it contained instructions written so clearly that anyone could use it to create magic tools. She then encouraged him directly, telling him to use the text and try his hand at crafting. The young elf could only manage a choked sound of surprise, still reeling from the day's events. He gestures frantically towards Sei, his voice filled with disbelief. The young elf, Terry, insists that the incredible item was only created because of her amazing talent, not because the process itself was simple. He questions why he's the only one she's familiar with, feeling the pressure of being singled out. He is left speechless, clutching the manual. Sei meets his doubt with a calm, knowing smile, assuring him that is not the case at all. His eyes widen in surprise as she reaches out and gently taps her finger on the surface of the manual he is holding. The touch activates the manual, causing it to erupt in a flash of light. Magical glyphs and holographic diagrams burst forth, swirling around the astonished elf. He stares in awe. The manual doesn't just have text. It provides clear explanations and visual demonstrations. A realization dawns on him. With this, perhaps it is possible after all. His newfound hope is immediately put to the test. With a confident smirk, Sei presents a raw magic core, and Terry steels himself for the attempt. A short while later, the assembled workers cry out in amazement. In just 10 minutes, Terry has produced a glowing, perfectly faceted sphere, a result identical to the one Sei had made earlier. The other workers, however, remain unconvinced of their own abilities. They murmur amongst themselves, acknowledging Sei's claim that anyone can do it, but feeling that they, personally, are not skilled enough. They conclude it's impossible for them, shaking their heads in resignation. Their murmurs of doubt do not go unnoticed. Sei addresses the entire group, explaining that alchemy is not a divine miracle, but simply a technique. The only things required, she states, are the will to learn and the proper amount of practice time. She beams with confidence, her maid Church standing beside her. With a bright smile, Sei declares that this applies not just to alchemy. Any skill can be mastered by anyone. She promises them that they will all become capable. She looks at the hesitant elf, Terry, and declares with a confident wink that her methods are absolutely reproducible. Terry, however, seems overwhelmed, stammering her name. From the crowd of workers, a single voice rings out, calling for Sei-sama. The voice belongs to Terry, who now looks directly at Sei, his earlier hesitation replaced by newfound resolve. He explains that her words have given him courage, and, on behalf of all the workers, he formally begs her to teach them her techniques. His earnest plea gives her pause. She turns away slightly, a thoughtful expression crossing her face as she admits to herself that she had been planning to leave immediately. Her gaze sharpens as she looks back at him, recognizing the look in his eyes. It is a gaze filled with determination. That look stirs a memory within her. She recalls a time when she, too, wore that same desperate expression. She realizes she cannot turn away from someone with such resolve. The memory brings a warm, genuine smile to her face. She finds the situation delightful and makes her decision, softly saying, "I understand." She turns back to face the hopeful workers, her expression bright and confident. "I'll provide you with technical guidance," she announces cheerfully. The workers erupt in gratitude. Sei addresses the entire group, assuring them that as long as they possess the correct knowledge and technique, the pollution from the factory will surely stop. Standing beside Church, she adds with a smile that while it will take some time and effort, she considers such detours to be one of the great pleasures of a journey. Several days later, the grand facade of the factory stands under a clear sky. Inside, a furious Abuksini storms the reception desk, demanding to know the whereabouts of that woman. The receptionist looks up, startled, as the imposing man glares down at him. He bellows with rage, declaring that this is his workshop and questioning what is going on. The receptionist calmly reports that the young lady said she had purchased the place with a large sum of gold. Abuksini furiously retorts that he never sold it and that she is simply making things up. His anger gives way to a panicked sweat as he recalls the severance pay he accepted. The receptionist watches him, coolly remarking that he thinks it's too late to do anything about it now. As he stammers, the young elf Terry approaches, informing him that Lady Sei will not be back until noon. Abuksini stares at him, bewildered. Enraged, Abuksini demands to know who this boy is. Terry calmly identifies himself as the deputy supervisor, dismissing the man's assumption that work has stalled. He challenges Abuksini to see for himself. Led to a balcony overlooking the main floor, Abuksini peers down, his eyes widening in utter disbelief at the sight below. He sees not chaos, but a completely transformed, pristine, and efficiently running workshop. Workers move with purpose around organized stations, with Sei visible in the distance, overseeing the operation. As he stares, dumbfounded, the management team explains the new reality. The remaining workers are simply off shift, as the factory now runs on a rotation. All Abuksini can do is stammer, asking what this all is. He storms towards the factory floor, shouting at Terry and the receptionist. He questions how they could possibly do such things and still expect to meet the delivery deadline. In response, a hand presents him with a brilliantly faceted, glowing sphere, a product of the new factory. Abuksini stares, momentarily stunned into silence. The young elf, Terry, casually states that there's no problem, attributing all their success to Lady Sei. In the background, Abuksini sees his former workers and reels in disbelief, wondering if he is dreaming. He continues enthusiastically, explaining that Lady Sei improved not only the technology, but the entire working environment. He adds with a triumphant grin that they're on track to finish producing all the magic tools for the upcoming month. The receptionist chimes in with a smug smile, noting that the quality of the work is in a completely different league and that their client is extremely satisfied with her. The barrage of information is too much for Abuksini. He stammers, finding the entire situation utterly impossible and unbelievable. A grim realization dawns on him. He had always believed his workers were nothing more than a collection of useless dregs, completely incapable of accomplishing anything without him. That belief shatters, leaving him slumped in defeat, unable to articulate his shock and newfound irrelevance. From within the transformed factory, a worker reflects on the past. They had simply done as they were told, never even thinking that their own environment could change. But the worker concludes with a sense of reverence. Everything changed the moment Lady Sei arrived. She stands with her new employees, a warm smile on her face as she addresses them. With Church and Terry at her side, she declares that this factory and everyone in it are now under her care. In response to her words, Terry's eyes widen with determination. He speaks up, affirming his own inclusion in her statement. Watching this display of loyalty, Abuksini can only grit his teeth, a bead of sweat tracing a path down his temple as his fury builds. His silent rage is broken by the receptionist, who calmly explains the situation. He tells Abuksini that it was a matter of incompetence. He was simply inferior. The receptionist adds that he prefers an employer who pays well, and tells the fuming man to give it up. As Abuksini bellows in frustration, the receptionist grabs him firmly by the collar of his opulent coat. Before the confrontation can escalate, Terry steps forward, placing a hand on the receptionist's arm to intervene. He then pivots and delivers a sharp, sudden punch directly to Abuksini's face. As a large man stumbles back, the receptionist announces that this is now Lady Sei's workshop. With Abuksini stunned on the floor, Terry looks down at him, his expression cold, and tells him to leave. The finality of his defeat crashes down upon him. Abuksini's face contorts in misery as tears and drool stream down, his pride utterly shattered. He turns and trudges away down a lonely forest path, a solitary figure of complete dejection. The work style reform is complete. A summons order had been issued to Sei by the on-site supervisor. Because she had been acting as she pleased, the higher-ups could no longer turn a blind eye to her activities. And this was precisely according to her plan. Lala listens as Sei explains her reasoning. To reform the entire guild, she needs to persuade the leadership. She reasoned that storming the headquarters would be a messy affair involving knights, so she simply waited for them to summon her, just as they now have. Hearing this, Terry looks at her with concern, pleading for her not to go. He stares, the reality of her departure sinking in. "You're leaving?" he murmurs, a hint of desperation in his voice. She turns back, a look of exasperation on her face. She declares that she has already taught them sufficient knowledge and skills, but Terry still insists he wants her to stay. His face falls as he processes her words, realizing she means his training is incomplete. So, my education is insufficient, he says to himself, addressing her as Seisama. Sei then approaches him, her expression softening slightly. She explains that her harsh words are intentionally meant to spur their growth. I'm sorry, I was wrong, she admits, leaving Terry confused by the sudden shift. His confusion melts away, replaced by a brilliant, determined smile. He declares that from now on, they won't just rely on her. They will work hard to improve themselves and become like her. I'll do my best, he proclaims with newfound resolve. She responds with a warm, genuine smile. That's right. Keep working hard, she encourages, while inwardly acknowledging that this was her true intention all along. She listens as her elf companion explains that, for Xenphis' sake as well, she wants to get to the capital headquarters as soon as possible. Standing nearby, Terry cheerfully admits that he was just saying things that sounded good earlier, prompting a silent, wide-eyed reaction from Church. His casual comment makes Sei break into a nervous sweat as she internally despairs, wondering why everyone is looking at her with such expectant eyes. A realization dawns on her. It's because she has been acting the part of a saintess. The elf companion's voice cuts through her thoughts, pointing out that recently, Sei hasn't even bothered to deny being a saintess and simply helps anyone she can. The directness of the statement leaves Sei speechless. From the side, Church observes the exchange with a subtle, knowing smile. The elf continues, explaining that from their perspective, that's exactly what they see. Daphne, Toka, and Xenphis all beam with cheerful agreement. Lala then chimes in, looking at Sei with earnest admiration. She states plainly that a saintess is someone who helps the weak. Completely flustered, Sei thinks to herself that she only did all those things to make her own journey more comfortable. She's just an alchemist, nothing more. Church, however, pays no mind to her internal denial. She simply smiles and points forward, indicating that their path is set. As the group's covered wagon rumbles out of the village, a local man waves them off, wishing them a safe journey. Inside, away from the public eye, Sei lets out a long, weary sigh. Her companion, the maid Church, observes this from across the wagon. She notes that even though Sei always complains about the trouble, she will inevitably end up helping people again. Sei insists that it was indeed a hassle. Beside her, the young elf Lala gazes at her with admiration, calling her Lady Saint. Annoyed, Sei sharply corrects her, stating she is an alchemist and should be called Big Sis. Their conversation is suddenly interrupted as Toka, Daphne, and Xenphis rush in. Toka urgently reports that people are being attacked by monsters. Her expression instantly shifts from irritation to alarm. Already, she exclaims in disbelief. Without hesitation, Church shouts that they are heading to the scene, and the wagon surges forward with renewed urgency. Ahead in the woods, Church spots the source of the commotion. A figure lies huddled on the ground, surrounded by several large, wolf-like beasts. The group's elf companion leaps into the fray, sword drawn. She expertly engages the monsters, positioning herself to shield the terrified person on the ground. Her eyes narrow with intense focus, a single bead of sweat tracing a line down her temple as she holds the line against the beasts. In the aftermath of the monster attack, Church turned to her master, inquiring about the two rescued elves, a knight and a young girl. What shall we do, master? She asked. Sei, looking towards them, replied with certainty, of course. With a brilliant smile and arms outstretched, she declared her intention to help them with her potions, adding that it was all for the sake of her enjoyable journey. The elven knight, her injuries now vanished thanks to Sei's healing draft, stared back with a serious, focused expression. She had accepted the offer of aid with a simple, firm yes. But now, the knight was visibly moved, a tear welling in her eye as she considered the selfless act. She couldn't believe someone would use such a valuable potion just to save her and the other girl. Her gratitude suddenly bursting forth. The knight seized Sei's hands in a tight grip. A dazzling, almost fanatical smile spread across her face as she addressed Sei as the traveling alchemist and thanked her for helping a fellow knight. Sei, taken aback by the sudden intensity, could only stare. The knight continued, expressing profound thanks for saving their lives and insisting on repaying the favor. She formally invited Sei and her companion to their headquarters. The nature of the invitation, however, made Sei wary. She internally questioned the suspicious proposal. The knight's fervor reached a new peak. Her eyes shone as she proclaimed that demonstrating your ladyship's power and service to God was undoubtedly the best course of action. The meaning behind the knight's words struck Sei with horrifying clarity. Her face twisted in shock as she realized she was being aggressively recruited into a religious group. The situation escalated as the zealous knight, still smiling brightly, began to physically drag the panicking Sei away. This is bad. Sei thought, what do I do in this situation? As she was pulled along against her will. Her struggle against the zealous knight's grip comes to an abrupt end as the elf suddenly collapses forward. Stunned, Sei can only watch as Church calmly reassures her not to worry. As the knight lies unconscious, Church reveals to the others that she used a tranquilizer dart. She urges the group to leave while they have the chance, but not before applying a monster-repelling potion to the sleeping elf and wishing her a safe journey home. Zenfis observes the scene, a thoughtful expression on her face. With the situation resolved, Church confidently leads a relieved Sei away from the scene, her duty fulfilled. As they depart, Zenfis glances back, her mind still on the encounter. She recalls the strange night, remembering that the elf was carrying something specific. The object she remembers is the knight's pendant, an ornate, cross-like symbol that glimmers in her memory. A feeling of déjà vu washes over her. She is certain she has seen it before. She racks her brain, trying to pinpoint where she might have encountered such a design, but the memory remains elusive. Sometime later, the sound of creaking wheels marks their continued progress. Riding in the back of the cart, Sei and her companions travel onward until Toka points ahead, announcing their arrival at their destination. Anemos Jeev, the land of the elves. Hearing the name, Sei's eyes widen in surprise. She murmurs the name of the royal capital, Jeev, finding their arrival there to be an unexpected turn of events. As she processes this, the leaves on the nearby trees rustle gently in the wind. She gazes in awe at the elven capital, a city of dwellings built into colossal, ancient trees. Taking a deep breath, she notes how remarkably clean and pure the air is. As she takes in the view, Zenfis approaches, her expression hesitant. She begins to explain that there might be an issue with setting up Sei's alchemy workshop in this place. Her words give Sei pause. She looks out at the arboreal city again, coming to the realization that such workshops likely do not exist in the elven capital. A bright smile spreads across her face as she connects the dots. She turns back, cheerfully concluding that the absence of workshops is precisely why no miasma is generated here. Despite Sei's cheerful deduction, Zenfis' expression becomes somber. She casts her gaze downward, a profound sadness clouding her features. Her friend's sudden shift in mood does not go unnoticed. Sei's smile fades, replaced by a look of quiet concern. She gently calls out her name, Zenfis-chan, trying to understand the source of her distress. Without waiting for a response, Sei steps forward and pulls the troubled girl into a firm, comforting embrace. From a nearby wagon, Daphne's worried voice calls out, Sei-sama. She points out that Sei's own expression has become grim. Held tightly in the hug, Zenfis looks up, her eyes wide with a mixture of surprise and unspoken emotion. Her mind echoed with a somber truth. The past could not be changed. Hearing this, Church gently interjected, reminding her that what mattered was the present, where all of her friends were with her. Toka and Daphne stood by in silent agreement as Zenfis slowly looked up from her despair. Sei then took the lead, her voice full of hope. She encouraged them all to look toward the future as they walked forward together. She pulled Zenfis into a warm embrace, her voice soft but firm as she urged, "Let's go." Zenfis' eyes widened, the warmth of the gesture cutting through her sorrow. Tears welled in her eyes as she managed a quiet, trembling agreement. She then returned the hug with all her strength, burying her face in Sei's shoulder and sobbing out her gratitude. Watching them, Daphne beamed and declared that if Zenfis ever felt sad again, she would give her a hug too. Church, ever the stoic observer, commented that such a display would be a little embarrassing. With the emotional crisis averted, Sei's focus sharpened. She turned to the group and proposed their next move, a visit to the Magic Guild. She explained that if the nation's current policies continued, it would lead to ruin, and she intended to persuade them to change their ways. A confident, determined smile spread across her face. She was ready to persuade them. She addresses her companions, acknowledging that the authorities they are about to meet may not listen obediently. However, she reassures them, stating that as long as they are all together, it will be fine. Her confidence is infectious, bringing smiles to the faces of Toka, Daphne, Zenfis, and Church. With a bright, determined grin, Sei declares that somehow they will make things work out. She then adds with a rather menacing cheerfulness that they will make it work physically. Zenfis grows anxious, pleading that they should try not to cause too much of a scene, while Church simply affirms that she understands the implication. As their cart rattles along, Sei muses aloud that becoming wanted fugitives would certainly make their journey less enjoyable. Her light-hearted thought is abruptly cut short as her eyes widen in pure, uncomprehending shock. The source of her shock becomes clear as she finds herself staring out from behind thick wooden bars. Utterly bewildered, she grips the bars of her enclosure, managing only a confused, The full, absurd reality of her situation crashes down upon her. She's trapped inside a cage on the back of a moving cart, being transported like cargo. How did this happen? She cries out, shaking the bars in a panic. Inside a dark cell, Sei clutches the bars in distress. She recounts that after she reported to the Magic Tool Guild, she was promptly arrested by knights. She finds herself imprisoned within the royal palace's dungeon, utterly bewildered. She cries out, questioning what she could have possibly done to deserve this. Meanwhile, the elf creator, also captured, considers her options. She knows she could easily escape with a teleportation potion, but her thoughts turn to Daphne, Zenfis, and Toka, who have also been taken prisoner. She concludes that if she were to resist, the other girls might not make it out safely. Her expression hardens with the weight of this dilemma. Back in the cell, Sei turns to her companion, Church. She notes that Church was captured too, but feels a flicker of reassurance, thinking that since she's a maid robot, she will likely be all right. Suddenly, a familiar, booming voice interrupts her thoughts. Abuxani, the gourmet of deadly poisons, appears before her cell, a wide grin on his face as he greets her, remarking that it's been a while. Sei whirls around, her eyes wide with shock and disbelief. She can only stammer, asking why he is here. His grin turns manic. He declares that his purpose is decided. Revenge. Sei echoes the word, completely stunned. Still reeling, Sei asks what she could have possibly done to him. Abuxani bellows back that she has done plenty. With chilling certainty, Abuxani informs her that she will be executed right there. He reveals he was ordered to eliminate her for interfering with his business and taking over the workshop. As Sei processes the word execution, the elf creator's internal thoughts confirm she received the same order. She recalled the moment she received her orders. The voice of the current elf king, the Forest King, had commanded her to act. She had questioned the reason for such a decree. Her thoughts returned to the present, standing before Sei's prison cell. She asked if the elf king was truly their ally. From within the darkness, Sei's voice corrected her, stating that he was allied with them, not with her. Abuxani, overhearing the exchange, interjected with a smug grin. He boasted that he and the elf king share a friendly relationship, and a sliver of understanding began to dawn on Sei. He elaborated on their pact. The elf king and a magic tool guild have colluded, prioritizing profit above all else. They are establishing workshops throughout the nation, indifferent to the suffering it may cause the populace. The revelation ignited a cold fury within Sei. Her expression hardened as she snarled, "You bastard." She could no longer contain her disgust for someone who so callously uses others for personal profit. Abuxani continued to mock her, calling her a spirited child. He offered a hollow pardon if she were to cry and beg, though he added she would remain his slave for life. In response, Sei raised a small vial. She declared that he was mistaken and asked if he truly expected her to grovel. Her voice then erupted with pure loathing as she screamed that she despises him. Her vehement cry stunned Abuxani, leaving him momentarily speechless. He recoiled, clutching his face as a searing pain shot through his eyes. He cried out in agony. Through the bars of her cell, Sei had seized Abuxani. Her alchemy workshop materialized around her, and a brilliant light erupted from her hand, enveloping the stunned merchant. She stands outside the prison cell, the bars now separating her from her captor. Abuxani, trapped inside, sputters in confusion, demanding to know why he is the one imprisoned. Calmly, Sei explains that she used alchemy. Meanwhile, observing from an unknown location, the elf creator smiles with satisfaction. She reveals that while Abuxani was blinded by a flashbang she had crafted from moss, Sei was able to execute her plan. She further clarifies to the enraged Abuxani that she simply altered the shape of the metal bars, effectively swapping their positions to place him inside and herself outside. He curses, realizing he has been completely outmaneuvered. He begins to panic, looking around wildly and shouting for someone to come and capture the escaping criminal. His cries go unanswered. The very principle of alchemy, the ability to freely reshape metals, has been turned against him. She pays him no mind, boldly declaring that she has no intention of running or hiding. Instead, she announces her plan to go and deal with the so-called Forest King directly. The meaning behind her words strikes Abuxani with full force. He clenches his fist in fury, realizing she intends to persuade the king with violence. Having secured her captor, she sprints down the stone corridor. Her first priority is to find her friends, hoping with all her might that they are unharmed. Peering down the long, arched hallway, her eyes lock onto figures in the distance. A wave of relief washes over her as she exclaims that she has found them. She finds Daphne, Zenfis, and Toka all safe and sound, much to her relief. Church is also present, her expression stoic as she reports to her master that she, too, had been captured. From a hidden vantage point, the elf creator watches the group. She remarks that unlike Sei, who is resilient enough not to die, her cute friends are different, implying they were in real danger and required her protection. She instructs the group to go with Church and head outside to rendezvous. As Zenfis hesitates, Daphne proudly explains that her rabbitkin hearing allowed her to track Church by following the sound of her crying. She then tells Zenfis that once they are all outside, she should use her magic to create a signal. Church, her expression filled with concern, asks about Lady Sei's whereabouts. The elf creator reassures her, stating that Sei has no intention of sacrificing herself for their escape. When Daphne presses for more details, the elf creator begins to explain that, to put it simply, itisakudita. Elsewhere, Sei herself announces her intentions with a determined grin. Her words are directed at a startled young elf, chained within a prison cell. He watches as she stands before the bars, greeting him cheerfully. She introduces herself as a traveling alchemist, addressing him as the prisoner. With a confident smile, she declares her plan to break out and asks for his help. The elf is taken aback, questioning her words. He points out that the cell is made of God-forged iron, making escape impossible. Unfazed, Sei places a hand on the bars, which immediately begin to glow with alchemical energy. She explains that she needs his cooperation, stating that more people are required to ensure a safe escape from their confinement. He seems to grasp her reasoning. Extending a hand, she offers him a choice, adding that he is free to remain in the cell for the rest of his life if he so chooses. She explains her plan to the elf, asking for his cooperation in freeing the other prisoners. He readily agrees to help, though he asks for her name. In response, she presents a jar of bubbling liquid, mistakenly calling him Robin-san. She explains that this solvent will be used to free the captured people. As the liquid eats away at the bars of his cell, the elf stares, asking what it is. He watches in disbelief, realizing the substance is dissolving the supposedly indestructible God-forged iron. Sei, however, cheerfully confirms that this is precisely its purpose, to melt the iron bars for their use. Terry, stunned, calls it magic water. His astonishment seems to irritate Sei, who clenches her fist and retorts that this is just a common use for alchemy. Turning to her maid, Church, she complains about being completely underestimated by Terry. She fumes that a standard solvent would never be powerful enough for this task, to which Church offers a placating, monotone agreement. Having vented her frustration, she turns back to Terry, who has now accepted the plan. She instructs him to take the solvent from her maid, who is carrying a large supply, and use it to release the other captives. Meanwhile, observing the unfolding events from afar, the elf creator smiles knowingly. She remarks that it's time for her to begin her own preparations, wishing them good luck. Back in the prison, Sei confidently declares that the situation is now in hand, entrusting the rest to Terry and Church. With her rescued companions, Daphne, Xenphis, and Toka, gathered behind her, she prepares to depart. Elsewhere, the swordsman Boris appears, his expression laced with concern. He looks around, questioning what in the world is going on. He stands in a dense forest, revealing that he and Philite traveled to the elf country after hearing rumors of the young miss being there. His agitation grows as he wonders what has become of her. The swordsman, Boris, stands with a young elf girl, looking perplexed. He remarks that the last time he was here, the forest was in ruins, and wonders aloud what could have possibly happened. The girl, Lala, addresses him by name and begins to explain. She is joined by another elf companion as she explains that a traveler, the saint, is responsible for saving them. Boris seems to find this explanation difficult to believe. Lala, however, is overcome with adoration, clasping her hands and exclaiming how wonderful the saint's power is. She recounts that the saint saved their village and then departed as quickly as she came, like the wind, before eagerly asking Boris if he agrees. Before he can properly respond, she leans in close, her eyes wide with fervor, and declares with absolute conviction that the saint is an amazing person. She then firmly grabs his hand, startling him with her sudden action. He can only stare back, a bead of sweat on his brow, completely taken aback by her intensity. With a determined grip, she begins to pull him through the woods, insisting that she will bring him along. Now walking together, with Lala still leading a reluctant Boris, their other elf companion looks at them both and asks what has gotten into them. Suddenly, Boris's demeanor shifts. His eyes narrow as he senses an approaching presence. He realizes someone is coming. From the trees emerges a figure clad in armor, a white silver mantle draped over their shoulders. Boris stares, recognizing the garment, as the zealous elf knight stands before them. Her attire is adorned with a gleaming, ornate cross-shaped pendant. Boris's eyes fixate on it, a look of shocked recognition on his face as he identifies it as an emblem of a holy knight from the Tended Church. As he processes this, his elf companion warns that the Tended Church is only kind to its own members. The knight, ignoring the comment, glares at them and demands to know why a Tended Knight is even there. Indeed, the two factions are fundamentally at odds. Whereas standard knights protect only believers, the holy knights prioritize the security of their organization and its faithful, readily discarding anyone else. This rigid doctrine clashes with the creed of freedom-loving adventurers. Because of this ideological divide, the knight admits that they do not get along. Boris, unimpressed, keeps his sword ready and demands to know her purpose for being there. She clarifies that she is merely searching for someone and has no intention of causing harm. When asked for more details, she describes the person as having beautiful, long silver hair. His eyes widen. The description of the hair, combined with the knowledge that this person uses incredible potions, clicks into place. He realizes with a start that she must be talking about the young Miss Sei. The knight's thoughts drift to the object of her search. She recalls a strong, kind, and magnificent person, like a holy mother, who she came to love. She has fallen completely for her. She declares her intention aloud. She is searching for that person to confess her love. A stunned Boris can only ask if she intends to marry her. The knight seems taken aback, admitting that such a thing would be impossible since they are both women. The implication hangs in the air for a moment before she exclaims, "A woman," as if truly processing it for the first time, before conceding the point. As the realization dawns on the knight, Boris's companion points out that the young miss is, in fact, also a woman. The knight finally understands, having now met people who know her beloved. Her passionate declaration that gender is irrelevant to love leaves Boris completely stunned and speechless. She continues with a determined smile, affirming that for her true feelings of love, it makes no difference whether the object of her affection is a man or a woman. Watching her, Boris internally brands her a dangerous person and quietly urges his companion, Philite, to back away. Philite, however, has the opposite reaction. With a radiant smile amidst a background of blooming flowers, she exclaims that she understands the knight's feelings perfectly, much to Boris's continued bewilderment. Seeing a kindred spirit, the knight turns to Philite and formally asks if she would be willing to join her in the pursuit of their shared person of interest. Without a moment's hesitation, Philite beams and accepts the offer with a resounding "of course." And just like that, a new companion officially joins their journey. The two women shake hands to seal their new alliance, while Boris looks on with a sense of weary resignation. The knight then turns her attention to Boris, asking for his name before introducing herself with a confident smile. She is ISEKAI'D, the Holy Knight. A strange meeting indeed has brought this new group together. In a tranquil, steamy bath, the zealous elf knight and her companion relax alongside a man, their worries seemingly washed away in the warm water. The peace is shattered as the knight suddenly runs off, shouting for the king of the forest. The scene shifts to a throne room where the elf guard, Terry, stands at attention, announcing he has a report for the king. A shirtless, crowned elf lounging on a throne, flanked by two young elf girls. The ruler, identified as Sazandora, the king of the forest, looks up from his leisure, his expression one of clear annoyance as he asks what the matter is. His irritation manifests as his hand clenches powerfully on the arm of his throne. He rises abruptly, his body trembling with rage as he glares down at the startled guard, demanding to know who dares to interrupt him. Sazandora throws his arm out in exasperation, yelling at Terry and questioning why he would be disturbed while he was enjoying himself with his kittens. The guard is paralyzed with fear, clutching the collar of his uniform as he stammers out a panicked, incoherent apology. The scene then shifts, revealing that Terry's report is being given elsewhere. A smug smile is seen before the perspective returns to the terrified guard stammering about the king of the forest. A sharp voice belonging to a Buxony cuts him off, demanding to know what is going on. Terry continues his report to a Buxony, stating that the captured woman has escaped. A Buxony is shocked. As the guard relays a summons for a Buxony, the scene briefly cuts back to King Sazandora, who angrily asks who this Abuxony is. Abuxony, in his own location, curses the escaped woman as a fool for obstructing his path to success. The guard concludes his report, informing Abuxony that the woman used some form of strange, mysterious technique to escape. Abuxony listens with a grim, thoughtful expression, processing this new, unexpected development. He explains with frantic urgency that he had successfully swayed the hearts of the guild members and was on the verge of presenting his prize to the king, but his plan was interrupted. The elf king, Sazandora, glares with fury from his seat, his voice sharp with disbelief as he questions, "She escaped?" As Abuxony stammers, the young elf Terry reports that he dispatched soldiers to capture the woman who fled. Abuxony, sweating profusely, demands to know what happened next. Meanwhile, Say glances back with a confident smirk, revealing that she has not, in fact, fled outside the castle walls. Sazandora's eye twitches with irritation, a sharp, escaping his lips as the situation spirals out of his control. A messenger bursts in, shouting for attention. He reports that someone is furtively moving about the castle, sneaking around here and there. In the background, Say walks calmly through a grand hall. The report continues with increased urgency. The prisoners within the castle are now rioting, rampaging through the halls. A guard captain confronts the messenger, demanding to know what is going on. The flustered elf can only reply that he doesn't know, but that there is more to the story. As Sazandora seethes, Say observes the chaos with a knowing smile, certain that the uprising is the handiwork of that woman. The captain furiously demands to know why the soldiers haven't captured her. The messenger explains that it's strange. For some reason, no one is able to get close to her. As she calmly proceeds, Abuxony watches her, sweating as he realizes she is once again using some strange, baffling technique. A nearby guard captain, also sweating, questions if the king is even capable of fighting her. He reports to Abuxony that the woman is heading straight for them, likely to meet the king, and that this is a convenient opportunity for them to prepare an ambush. Abuxony seems surprised by the captain's words. A woman standing beside the guard asks if he is concerned. At that moment, the elf king Sazandora's expression hardens with resolve, his hand clenching into a tight fist. He suddenly turns and grabs Abuxony's face, demanding to know who Abuxony thinks he is. Sazandora declares that he is the man who studied under the ancient great sage and received his complete teachings. Forced to his knees, Abuxony apologizes profusely for his doubt. Sazandora smirks, stating that a mere underling wouldn't be expected to understand. His demeanor then shifts to one of manic glee. He proclaims that knowing he is the disciple of the great sage, who wielded immense power across the lands, makes the thought of his opponent's reaction incredibly amusing. Abuxony, still on the floor, is baffled by what has been done to the king. Sazandora throws his arms back, unleashing a torrent of power. He roars with absolute confidence that with his strength, he will be victorious against the woman. Just as he makes his declaration, a Buxini looks past him in alarm, shouting that the woman has arrived. Sei stands before them, offering a polite greeting to the king of the forest. She then notices a Buxini, asking if he broke out of jail. He furiously retorts that she is the one who escaped. Unfazed, Sei overhears the talk of a great sage and his #1 disciple, and wonders aloud who that is and why it should be impressive. She listened as the elf king Sazandora continued his boast, declaring that he would teach an ignorant person like her about his master. He proclaimed this master was a user of the strongest arts, magic, swordsmanship, and alchemy, also known by the name of the great sage of old. As Sazandora spoke, a Buxini chimed in with a booming, reverent voice, shouting the master's name. Nicholas Flamel. The name gave her pause. Sei muttered it to herself. Nicholas Flamel, wondering if he meant the ancient great sage she had heard of. Before she could fully process the thought, the nearby guard captain enthusiastically confirmed it, shouting his unwavering support for King Sazandora. But the king's confident demeanor shattered in an instant. His face contorted in abject terror, sweat beading on his brow as he stared past Sei at something that had just appeared. Both he and a Buxini were stunned by the sight of a woman in a long dress and hat who had silently entered the hall. The king collapsed back into his throne, utterly aghast. The sudden tension frightened Daphne, who began to tremble and cling to Sei. Sei, however, looked directly at the newcomer with disbelief and asked if she was alive, clarifying that she wasn't speaking to the pipsqueak Sazandora. As the woman, Nicholas Flamel, walked calmly towards them, Sei pressed her question, asking why her senior was alive when she was supposed to be in a state of suspended animation. Seeing this unfold, a Buxini frantically urged King Sazandora to defeat the woman. But the king, now cowering on the floor, retorted that it was impossible. He screamed that they would be killed. In his despair, Sazandora revealed the truth to a Buxini. This woman was on another level of strength. She was, in fact, the one his own master, Nicholas Flamel, had designated as the #1 ranked individual. His shocking admission is met with a bright, almost mischievous smile from Sei. She cheerfully announces her full title as the first apostle, Sei Fart, the king of all things, adding that the ranking was something her master decided on a whim. Her casual explanation is ignored by Nicholas Flamel, whose sharp gaze fixes upon Sazandora. Flamel states that she came to see him on business, but his recent behavior has been excessive. Panicked, Sazandora calls out to his senior, insisting it's all a misunderstanding. She continues her indictment, her voice cold and level. Flamel accuses him of staging a coup, creating a guild solely for his own profit, and ultimately corrupting the nation, declaring that he is the one who brought the country to ruin. Her words push Sazandora to a breaking point, and he shouts in desperation. Flamel, however, remains resolute, declaring that as his senior apprentice, she cannot permit him to disgrace their master's name any longer. The escalating tension between the two alchemists leaves Sei completely bewildered, sweating nervously as she watches the confrontation unfold. She can only watch as a low, powerful rumbling begins to emanate from where Sazandora stands, a palpable shift in the room's energy. The display of power instantly changes a Buxini's demeanor from terror to manic glee. He exclaims that with the king's invincible ability, they can surely defeat this woman, as Sazandora prepares to unleash his power. In response to his call, a regal, ethereal figure materializes in the air, the physical manifestation of Sazandora's vaunted ability. The ethereal figure is met with a look of pure disdain from Nicholas Flamel, who remarks that such a trite thing cannot even be called a proper ability. She then calmly explains the simple truth, causing a Buxini to cry out in disbelief. Flamel reveals that the true identity of the force that had been choking him was simply poison gas. She continues her explanation, detailing how the trick works. It gathers harmful substances from the atmosphere, like carbon dioxide, and concentrates them into a gas around the target. This creates the sensation of being choked or suffocated. Hearing his invincible power so easily dismissed, Sazandora seethes with rage, shouting that it's nonsense. Unfazed, Flamel notes that it was a simple alchemy trick, and since her own skills are far superior, it was easy to unravel. She then questions him directly, asking if he is truly using the arts taught by their master for such nefarious purposes. As Flamel's condemnation hangs in the air, another voice cuts in, declaring that they will act in the master's stead. The voice belongs to Sei, who has suddenly appeared, holding a potion aloft. She announces her intent to deliver his punishment, causing Sazandora to recoil in shock, his eyes fixed on the vial she holds. Behind her, a colossal entity of swirling flame takes shape, its form resembling a great beast. With a calm smile, Sei identifies her creation, a spiritus fire, an artificial flame spirit. Her smile twists into a predatory grin. She explains that while their master was the one who conceived of the theory, she alone was the one to bring it to completion. The overwhelming presence of the flame spirit completely shatters Sazandora's arrogance. He is now on the floor, desperately begging Senior Sei for forgiveness. Nearby, The equally terrified Abuxani can only stammer in awe at the creature's immense size. She responds to his pleas with a bright, cheerful no. Holding up a shimmering revival potion, she cheerfully states that since there's a saying that fools can't be cured unless they die, he should just die once. After all, she has a potion to bring him back. As Sazandora lets out a wail of pure terror, Sei points an accusatory finger. She commands her Spiritus Fire to punish her idiot junior disciple. A moment later, a tremendous explosion erupts from the top of the castle, the force of the blast shaking the very foundations of the structure. In the aftermath of the concussive blast, Sazandora prostrates himself on the cracked stone floor before Sei, bowing his head to the ground. He offers a desperate apology for his actions. He looks up, his expression a mixture of fear and reverence, swearing not just to Sei, but to a higher power, that he will never again misuse their master's arts. Sei looks down, warning him that she won't revive him next time. With that, she accepts his words, and he expresses his profound relief and happiness. From the sidelines, Terry calls out her name in awe. As the situation calms, Sei's companions, Daphne, Toka, and Xenphis, rush towards her, their faces etched with worry as they cry out for their big sis and master. The zealous elf knight quickly checks on a trembling Xenphis, while Sei turns to the group with a reassuring smile. She apologizes for worrying them, confirming that she is completely unharmed. Touched by their earnest concern, Sei flushes, a wide grin spreading across her face. She thinks to herself how utterly adorable they are. Beside her, Church observes the scene with her usual stoic impassivity. She then puts on a show for her friends, exclaiming how terrible the situation was and that she might have died if her opponent had been stronger. Her companions listen, their expressions full of concern. Her internal monologue, however, reveals her true feelings. She was never worried. She reflects that unless a demon king or an evil god were to be revived, there is no way she could lose, not with the powerful potions she always carries. A look of absolute, unshakable confidence settles on her face. She knows with certainty that defeat is simply not an option for her. A subtle, smug smile graces her lips, betraying her immense self-assurance in her own overwhelming power. This display does not go unnoticed. Terry, looking perplexed, recalls her previous inaction. He asks aloud why, if she is truly invincible, she didn't bother to fight the monsters during the recent monster parade. His pointed question causes Sei to stammer, struggling for a response. The rest of her companions, along with the kneeling Sazandora, watch the tense exchange. She finally composes herself, explaining that her strength is entirely dependent on her potions. During the monster parade, she simply did not have enough of her handmade magic potions and was thus powerless to help, even if it meant being unable to save someone in a near-death state. Before Terry can respond to her explanation, the zealous elf knight strides forward, interrupting them. She addresses Terry by his alias, Robin, and declares that while Sei may be unbeatable now, that wasn't always the case. The knight then turns her full attention to Sei, bowing deeply. She offers her heartfelt gratitude for the subjugation of Sazandora, the king of the forest. Her expression is one of pure reverence as she looks upon Sei, calling her the savior saintess. Sensing Sei's slight confusion, the knight insists her gratitude is not an exaggeration. She explains that her people have suffered for many years under the king of the forest rule, and despite fighting back, they could not win and were forced into servitude. As Sei begins to grasp the gravity of their history, the knight emphasizes that Sei's intervention was their salvation. Having conveyed her people's thanks, the knight then asks if Sei would be willing to hear one more request. Feeling generous, Sei casually agrees, asking what it is. With a beaming smile, Sei gives her assent. The knight's eyes burn with zealous fire as she makes her grand request, that the saintess become the new king of the elf nation, Anemis Jiv. The casual agreement dies on Sei's lips as the words register. Utterly flabbergasted, she recoils in shock, demanding to know what the knight just said. Behind her, Church peeks out, a knowing smirk on her face. Her shock was completely ignored. The zealous elf knight turned to the assembled elves, triumphantly announcing that Lady Saint had become their new king. As the crowd murmured in surprise, Sei frantically tried to correct the record, shouting that she had absolutely no intention of accepting the role of king. Her voice carried across the clearing, declaring that from this day forward, this is what she should be called. In response, the crowd of elves erupted in a massive cheer, enthusiastically agreeing to call her Saint King. Even her own companions were swept up in the moment. Daphne cheered at how amazing her big sis was, while Xenphis and Toka both agreed that this was to be expected of their master, certain that with Sei in charge, everything would be fine. As Xenphis beamed, declaring that the country would surely be safe now, Church offered a small comfort, patting a despondent Sei on the head and telling her not to worry about it. She clutched her head, utterly bewildered as to how the situation had escalated so dramatically. From the side, her creator, the elf master, watched with a knowing smirk, offering only a single, cryptic word, hint. As Sei's confusion deepened, Church cheerfully commented on the course of events, musing aloud if this was simply a case of good deeds leading